Split the difference. Yeah. All right. Call this meeting of the Elko County School District Board of Trustees to order. Will you please join me in a pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item 1.03, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Brian, seconded by Teresa to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. Item 1.04, input from public. This is a period devoted to comments by the general public, if any, and discussion of those comments. In the interest of privacy and due process, the public is requested to not raise personnel issues, except in a legally noticed closed personnel session of the board. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. No action may be taken upon a matter raised. This is a non-action item. So we do have some individuals that have filled out speaker cards. The first one is Katherine Hawley. Come on up to the podium, state your name, please.
My name is Katherine Hawley. I'm a parent and a grandparent of 2 children in this community. I wanted to yield my time to somebody else because I'm not completely prepared. That's why I was hoping I didn't go first. Anybody want to step in that needs to leave early? If not, I will not yield my time. What I will say to you is that I am completely opposed to my grandchildren wearing masks in school. They complain of heavier breathing, more troubled breathing. They're psychologically don't understand. They can't read expression. They can't see what other people are feeling and seeing. This is taking away a lot of their necessity in life. We are not robots. We are not here to be hidden from everybody. It is a personal choice, whether you have, and it's nobody's business whether my grandkids have been vaccinated. Well, obviously they're not because they're under 5, but it is nobody else's decision but mine and their parents, because right now I have guardianship of them. So I'm making it my responsibility to stand here in front of you and form my opinion. Masks do not help these children psychologically in school. They do not help them to breathe better. They have trouble with that when they're trying to breathe through those masks. I have trouble when I'm breathing through those masks. To ask a small child to do this is not okay. It is not okay for it to be a written law that we have to do this. We should have individual rights. We should be able to choose, and I should be able to choose what happens to my children. It should not be anybody else's choice, just like we've always had the choice of immunization. We should have the choice whether they're going to wear a mask or not. And if somebody else is vulnerable, that's not something I can choose. That's their choice, whether they're going to teach that child or be able to teach children or not. That is something that they have to decide. Okay, I may have to make a career change, but I am going to say that I have the choice for my grandchildren. And I think that we should all be on the children's side of this agenda to wear masks. We should not have to make it, everybody has to walk in and wear masks. How many suicides did we have over the summer? How many suicides have we had and the increase of suicides? Because children are being set back from not being able to be completely emotional with each other, not having the right to breathe well air, and then getting sick from it. They have gotten sick from it. My grandkids have gotten sick from breathing in that air, and I had to be called back from school. I had to have them call me and say, hey, they're having trouble. Come get them. That's not fair to the children. That's not fair to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle?
Good evening. I'm sure nobody's surprised when you look at the news or you look at everything, you see the state of our country and everything that we're going through right now. We're literally under attack. I mean, when the president of the United States says up and says, we take all immigrants except Cubans, there's something going on there, right? Like, I mean, you can't deny what's happening right now. But what they forget is that momentum, it always swings back. And it's coming back, and it's coming back hard. And they need to realize that. And that's where all of these people and everybody else that's standing up in these meetings is coming from. I know I always say, you know, we're not Clark County, we're not Washoe County. Why do I say that? I say that because they're not Nevada. That's why I say that. They're California. We're Nevada. 90% of Nevada thinks exactly like the people in this room. They're all going to be doing the same things that we're doing. We need to protect our teachers. We need, because our teachers protect the students. We need to protect them from being attacked for having different opinions. We need to protect them from these unions that are way out of control and way overstepping their bounds, because they need to be put in check really quick. When we went to the city council meeting a few weeks ago, the city attorney was quick to remind the mayor that we are still subjects to our governor and the state of Nevada. But the constitutional county actually refutes that, not because we're spoiled brats having a tantrum, but because it's what's right. And it protects our rights as Americans and as human beings from government overreach and violating us. And that's exactly what's been happening. So I disagree. We are not subjects to the governor. We are free individual beings. And especially when it comes to unlawful rules and mandates. And just today, I just received this thing and it says, and I quote, as access to the COVID-19 vaccines has come widespread, numerous educational institutions, employers, and other entities across the United States have announced they will require individuals to be vaccinated against COVID-19 as a condition of employment, enrollment, participation, or some other benefit, service, relationship, or access. The Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel wrote in an opinion, for instance, certain schools will require vaccination in order for students to attend class in person, and certain employees will require vaccination as a condition of employment. And it says the DOJ says that concerning EUAs, it does not prohibit public or private entities from imposing vaccine requirements, even when the only vaccines available are those authorized under the emergency use. That's really scary. And that totally didn't even fit into what I was going to talk about, but I just got that about 5 seconds ago, right before I stood up. So I just wanted to read that to you guys to know that the DOJ came out and said that today. So this is this is most likely going to happen in Nevada because we've done everything else that they've been telling us to do.
Time.
Thank you. Lee Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Again, my name is Lee Hoffman for the record. I just came from the Elko City Council meeting where I'm happy to say, as small a step as it is, the City Council approved a letter in support of your letter to the governor and in support of the county's resolution. So they have adopted that, and that letter will be going. It's only a small step. And just kind of a side comment, one of the city staff said, because they wanted to include the resolution and your letter as attachments, and they said they didn't have a signed copy of the school board's letter. So perhaps someone could work with city staff to make sure that they get a copy of that. Having said that, the late breaking news appears to be that the governor is re-implementing mask mask mandates in indoor spaces in 12 counties, including Elko County. And so our struggle for individual rights is going to carry on, and you guys are still going to have tough decisions to make. Interesting comment in one of the news articles was the masks won't crush the spread of the disease. It will just put pressure on the unvaccinated to go get vaccinated so we can open up again. So anyway, thank you for the letter you sent. City Council is with you. The school board is with you, and we have to keep pushing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Taylor.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Taylor. I'm the mother of 2 children here in this district. I've lived here for 30 years, and I've been a teacher here for 14 years. Since the shutdown, I've conducted research from a huge variety of resources, and I've taken that research and balanced it with my own observations and experiences. And I have several concerns for the upcoming school year, but I'm focusing on masks and mental health. Here, there are plenty of studies that do show masks do more harm than good for the kids, and I'm only going to touch the surface. As a teacher, I had the rare opportunity this last year to roll up from one grade to the next. So I had half of my students for 2 years, and it broke my heart to see the toll that it took on them. Their whole demeanor, going from positive and happy and uplifting to just mundane, anxious, depressing behaviors. And then even though towards the end of the year, they were only able to go maskless for a short time, their demeanor improved so much. And now as a parent, my youngest went to a really dark place mentally and regressed a ton socially. She has ADHD and autism, and masks were definitely a challenge. My oldest spiraled downward from a positive, upbeat go-getter to having anxiety and depression. Even with help, she wasn't getting better. And it wasn't until actually when the masks came off that she finally started getting better, but it's still long-term damage that we're having to work through. Since believe the science is the rally cry behind masks, vaccines, etc., here's some information. According to the DCFS state report on mobile crisis response to behavioral health, cases increased by 76%. The previous year had only increased by 9%. So that's not just a normal steady increase of any kind. It worries me because imagining the damage it's going to do to these kids, having to put them back into these masks, it scares me. And why? The CDC's own information states that children are less likely to develop severe illness or die from COVID. For children ages 0 to 17, the death numbers are so low that statistically it's 0%, and they account for 12.5% of cases. And I am aware of what the CDC had said earlier, but even their own information doesn't totally back their decisions up. Some say masks are important to protect the older populations, and well, vaccines are available to them. That's their choice. We parents have the right to make our own healthcare choices for our families, and we need you to help stand up for our right to choose. Most of us, as a lot of you have requested, have gone and contacted the governor. Time. Thank you.
Thank you. Misty?
Misty Atkins, founder of Parents of Elko County. A lot of information has come out just in the last half an hour. So it's kind of changed what I was going to talk about. With the CDC recommending that everyone, including fully vaccinated individuals, wear a mask in public indoor settings with counties with substantial or high transmission. Elko is included in the substantial or high transmission. Transmission, the definition of transmission is passing or sending of it to a different person or place. Transmission is not a high rate of deaths. It is not a high rate of hospitalizations. It is not a high rate of children being affected by this virus. And as a matter of fact, the children that have been affected by this virus have been vaccinated. I did want to get to I'm very disappointed with your reopening plan and would like to point out a few things. It looks like the money that you took from the American Rescue Plans Act has obligated you to add the third paragraph of the introduction where it says, this report complies with all reporting requirements of the ARP Act and the grant terms and conditions and assurances. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what it looks like to me. That's how I read it. With that being said, it seems to me that's why we are awaiting updated guidance from the governor and are awaiting an unprofessional amount of time on a response that will never come from the governor on this letter, and are taking choice from parents and look like little sheep. We look like sheep in Elko County. You want to have choice here in Elko. I've had other people say the same thing and have those same feelings and regards. Allowing the governor to take over Elko County when we are Elko County and he's Las Vegas is wrong on every level. Carson City will not be requiring masks for this coming year, but now with this latest re-implementation of the mask mandates, we don't know what's going to happen. As of May 1st, 2021, according to Directive 044, it states in section 13, authority of managing certain COVID-19 mitigation measures is delegated to county, school districts, charter school sponsors, and private school leaders. School leaders may determine capacity limits, social distancing protocols, and sanitation protocols for school transportation, spaces with building or school buildings or on school grounds, and for public gatherings and events of up to 250 people. School leaders, you guys, should make these decisions in consultation with staff and families, as well as local public health authorities. Update on PCR testing. It is now under a class 1 recall, which is the highest, strongest, worst class of recall that there is, due to the number of discrepancies in their inaccuracy in diagnosing COVID-19, false positives and false negatives. So how are we going to know what our actual numbers are? We're not. This new test that's coming out that's replacing this test,
Okay.
we know nothing about it either.
Christy Brewster.
Dr. Christy Armbruster, for the record, retired pediatrician. I have 3 concerns. Number 1, I was invited to meet with Mike Smith regarding the general funds budget. Last time that was canceled, so I still don't know how the money is balanced here. My concern is still about the $150 million bond you're looking for. We want to see how the general funds are being used, if we could tweak that to see if that would actually be in budget before we give you $150 million more. I understand it's different allocations, but the concept is there. Number 2, masks are such a problem. The CDC came out recommending that all children will be in masks again. However, it's a recommendation, not required. And so I think that that's an important thing, that we make a stance now that the parents will choose no matter what, because as has been mentioned by other parents, it's not about COVID anymore. It's not about spreading. People aren't dying like you're seeing or we were anticipating. It's about control. And the problem with the masks, as a pediatrician telling you, their mental and emotional well-being is down the toilet. They can't learn well. They can't read lips. They can't see facial expressions. They can't breathe well. And the other thing that's going to be happening, you think of warriors going out to war, they have to go into a zone and hear a bomb. Guess what's going to happen to these kids when they have to put their muzzle back on? Just thinking about it, I'm having post-traumatic stress syndrome myself, and I didn't do that. So I want to make sure you guys stand up and say, no, we will not force a mask, period. These kids deserve education without that stipulation. Second concern. So third concern, the injections. The county commissioners passed the vaccine passport prohibition. They cannot mandate it within Elko County. You guys work together. We're so excited to see that. They agreed with your letter, sent something to the governor as well to support. So you 3 between the city council and you guys are working together, and that is awesome. For your information, I looked up today on the CDC's own website, the vaccine adverse event reporting system. There are 111,011 deaths from the injection. 111,000 people have died. Over 16,000 of those died on the first day. So they got the shot and they were dead that day. We cannot do that. We cannot force that for the teachers, for the students, for admin. We have to make sure that we stand strong and say, no, people are not running to the hospital and the hospital is not overrun. That was their first lie. We're going to quell the curve. It's going to be 2 weeks. We complied. Oh, we're spreading it to the old people. We complied. We're going to mask up. We complied. We're done. Their lies are caught and we're done. So please stand up, protect the children. We're here backing you. The county commissioners with you, the city council's with you. We're all with you together. Let's stand up as Elko County and say, we have choice. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was the last sheet that I have a sign up. Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment? All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 1.05, receipt of a presentation regarding the process for the establishment of standards, curriculum, and instructional materials in the state of Nevada. So this is an overview of how the processes work here in the state of Nevada and how things work between the school district and the State Department of Education and the State Board of Education. So, Mr. Walls, would you like to lead this off?
I will be, thank you.
Or Mr. Anderson, either one, welcome.
Mr. Anderson's the button pusher for this one. I'll be the
Okay.
button pusher for the next one. So thank you, President Cooney. Yes, this is a presentation to describe and hopefully educate the board and public that's here on the process of standards being drafted in the state of Nevada and how they work their way down to curriculum and instruction delivery in the classrooms. So the process to develop curriculum in the state of Nevada, it starts with the council to establish academic standards for public schools, moves on to the actual establishment of standards, to our local board review of implementation within our own school district, moves down to the textbook selection process. And then we're going to get to where Elko County School District is right now in this process. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is when I look at throughout my career, whenever I've thought about standards on down to instruction in the classroom, that upside down pyramid is always the visualization I have in my head, that Nevada state standards or any state standards are a broad set of standards. And when it gets all the way down to the point of that pyramid, it's narrowed down to exactly what the teacher is delivering to kids in those classrooms. So we've included in our presentation several statutes that guide the process of standards development and textbook adoption. And I'm going to go through those, and sometimes presentations where people are just reading aren't the most entertaining, but it's good information that I wanted to share with everybody. So the first statute I wanted to share is NRS 389-510, which states, and most of these statutes, we didn't include every bit of text. We included the general idea. I want people to have a general idea of how this works without having to recite every colon, semicolon, and that. So, but anyway, NRS 389-510, the state council appointed by the superintendent of public instruction to establish academic standards is called the council to establish academic standards for public schools. And that council consists of 8 members. 4 members are appointed by the governor, including 2 parents or legal guardians of pupils who attend public schools and are not otherwise affiliated with the public school system, and 2 members who are licensed educational personnel. And so far as practical, the members appointed by the governor are to reflect the geographical diversity of the state. 2 additional members are appointed by the majority leader of the Senate, and the last 2 members are appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly. The majority leader of the Senate and the Speaker of the Assembly shall ensure that, number one of the members whom he or she appoints is a member of the House of Legislature to which he or she belongs. And number 2, the other member whom he or she appoints is a representative of a private business or industry that may be affected by actions taken by this council. Also, each member of the council must be a resident of the state of Nevada, and the term of each member of the council is for 4 years. And to finish up, the council is also outlined by NRS 389-520 to establish the establishment, periodic review, and adoption of standards by the state board. So that council establishes standards of content and performance for certain courses of study, and those courses of study are listed there on the slide. The council also establishes a schedule for the periodic review and, if necessary, revision of those standards. And when they do those reviews, they have a checklist they use, and Mr. Anderson's going to click there, just a quick review of the checklist that they use when they're reviewing standards that are in place. And in utilizing that checklist, that may or may not result in changes to standards during their review processes. And that council, in establishing standards, well, actually, I'm sorry, in NRS, there are requirements in statute for some items that have to be included within the standards for the core content areas. And the Department of Education or the state of Nevada identifies computer ed and technology, social studies, health, English language arts, and math as the core content areas. Continuing on with the establishment of Nevada state standards, the council forwards to the state board the standards established by the council. So that council determines standards, and they forward them to the State Board of Education. At that point, the board adopts the standards, or if the state board objects to the standards for a course of study or a particular grade level for a course of study, they return those standards to the council with an explanation of the objection. At that point, the council shall consider the objection provided by the state board and determine whether to revise the standards based upon that objection, or they return the standards or the revised standards as applicable to the state board. Then when that happens, the state board shall adopt the standards of content and performance or the revised standards. So that is a brief description of how standards are developed in the state of Nevada and how they're reviewed in the state of Nevada. Now we're going to move on to textbook adoption. And when we talk about textbook adoption, we've had some discussions in board meetings over the years about textbook adoption and the process that's followed. And that process was different prior to 2019 than it is now. So just a real quick description of what the process was prior to 2019. Prior to then, school districts reviewed instructional materials and selected their preferred option. So school districts would go out and choose if there was 5 textbooks they wanted to pilot, whatever they wanted to pilot, go through a pilot and a review process. And at the end of that, they would submit a request to the Department of Ed for approval of those materials. If the Department of Ed approved of that request, then the school district could go ahead and purchase those materials. If that was denied, then the school district would go back to the drawing board and possibly look at the other items that they piloted, or maybe just pilot brand new items. So, but anyway, that was the process prior to 2019. Next, I'm going to talk about the current state textbook adoption process. So again, and I'm going to draw a little bit of attention to that upside down pyramid. It'll appear periodically throughout our presentation. And what it is, what we tried to demonstrate was the narrowing down from state standards down to classroom instruction. So for all content areas, the adoption process starts with vendors submitting materials for review as put forth by an RFI issued by the Nevada Department of Ed. The instructional materials are submitted are subject to an internal review conducted by the NDE staff as per the RFI. So vendors can submit their materials to the Department of Ed. All submitted materials will be reviewed by the Nevada Instructional Materials Steering Committee, so NIMSC. That committee is made up of instructional leaders from each of Nevada's school districts and has the charge of receiving, reviewing, and making recommendations to the state board regarding the adoption of all instructional materials that drive instruction in the classroom. Continuing with state textbook adoption at the state level. NRS 3-9850, final selection by the board. The state board shall make the final selection of all textbooks to be used in the public schools in the state except for charter schools. The state board shall not select a textbook unless the state board determines that the textbook adequately supports the standards for that subject area. So that NIMSC committee forwards their recommendations after review to the state board. This link is an example of an approved list of instructional materials in the state of Nevada. This is the approved list of math instructional materials in the state of Nevada. And there's approved list for several subject areas on the department website. We just wanted to show an example of one of them. Now, continuing on, NRS 389-860. Title of that statute is Contracts by State Board for Purchase. The State Board may make such contracts for the purchase and use of textbooks in the name of the state as it deems necessary for the interest of public schools. Basically, what that statute does is when those textbooks are approved by the State Board, the state can develop a contract with that textbook provider that locks us into a price, so that if a school district selects a textbook maybe 2 or 3 years after it was adopted by the Department of Ed or the State Board, that school district can't be charged a different price than the school district that adopted that material a few years back. Okay, so now we're going to move on to local textbook adoption at our district level. And again, like we see, that pyramid is getting narrower and narrower as we get closer to the classroom. So first off is a local review, and this consists of, well, first I'll go through the NRS. The statute requires that there's a review of courses of study to determine compliance with standards. The Board of Trustees of each school district shall conduct a periodic review of the courses of study offered in the public schools to determine whether the courses of study comply with the standards of content and performance established by the council, and if revision of the courses of study is necessary to ensure compliance. We're going to show a quick example of a standard. So this is first grade math standards in the state of Nevada. It's a fairly lengthy document, but this is an example of how they're laid out and what a committee within the school district would be reviewing to determine that our curriculum is in alignment with state standards. I think we probably got the hint. So an explanation of how we achieve this requirement in Elko County School District is we convene a curriculum committee to review the current ECSD curriculum for that content area, as well as the Nevada Academic Content Standards as established by the council. After review, the committee selects textbooks from the state-approved textbook list to be piloted locally. So prior to choosing which textbooks we're going to pilot and review, we go through our own curriculum and look compared to the state standards and ensure that our curriculum and our plan for instruction is in alignment with state standards, and also so that those committee members, those standards are fresh in their mind and our curriculum is fresh in our mind prior to taking a look at textbooks available to us.
Mr. Walls, can I interrupt you just one moment?
Mhm.
Who makes up that committee?
We develop those committees when we're preparing to go through an adoption. So if it's a math adoption, for example, we'll have a sample of elementary teachers and math teachers from middle and high school levels, usually a couple of administrators. Anyway, yeah, that's who usually comprises those committees.
Thank you.
That curriculum committee will manage then the piloting of the selected textbooks in representative classrooms throughout the school districts. So that committee will take a look at the approved textbooks, the state approved textbooks, determine which ones are going to pilot. And normally it's members of that committee who are piloting that textbook in their classrooms. Sometimes if, you know, when I mentioned elementary teachers, if there's, you know, 5 elementary teachers on the committee and there's a grade level missing, we might go pursue a teacher from that grade level so that we have that pilot being done at all the grade levels.
How long does that pilot process take?
The pilot process is usually about 4 to 6 weeks because we want to be able to pilot more than one textbook. So we want to have some time to review what we've piloted and move on to the next textbook to review. And I'm going to get to later. We've kind of had a gap in textbook adoptions over the years, But so it's been a while, but sometimes those committees, I've had teachers when I've been on the committee before request a little more time with the textbook, and we've always accommodated that. During that pilot process, we and vendors are happy to send us copies of their books when we're considering spending money on their books, but we always get additional copies of those textbooks so that during the entire pilot process, we have examples of those textbooks available for stakeholder input. Usually we use the boardroom and make and we make public notices that they are available so that we can collect feedback from stakeholders. That committee then makes a final recommendation to the Board of Trustees based upon feedback from the teachers who piloted the test book, stakeholder feedback, and the committee review of textbook alignment with Nevada academic content standards. Upon board approval of that recommendation by the curriculum committee, the school district then submits that textbook selection for approval to the Department of Ed. Okay. So that summarizes selecting the textbooks through that curriculum committee. And as you can see, like I said before, our pyramid keeps getting narrower and narrower as we get closer to classroom instruction. So now we're going to move on to the curriculum planning portion. So our district develops curriculum scope and sequence, pacing guides, achievement indicators, et cetera, those kind of tools to be used by our teachers, utilizing the adopted textbook as the foundation for curriculum planning. Our district communicates and distributes the curriculum resource to all of our stakeholders. So it's available for us. So everybody has all the resources that we can generate to support that textbook that we've chosen. And there are still a couple of additional statutes to be made aware of. NRS 389-870 states the Board of Trustees of school districts shall enforce the use of textbooks prescribed and adopted by the state board and use of prescribed textbooks. The textbooks adopted by the state board must be used in public schools in the state, and no other books may be used as basic textbooks. This does not prohibit the continued use of such textbooks previously adopted until they become unserviceable. The use of supplemental textbooks purchased by a school district with the approval of the superintendent of public instruction, or after approval by the state board, the temporary use of textbooks for tryout purposes. Reason I included that last one, we've had the questions a few times from that state adopted list of textbooks. If a school district adopts one of those textbooks, goes through a process and adopts it, and a year or two after that, there's one of those state board review processes. And if that happens to result in that textbook being eliminated from that list, if we would then have to, well, maybe only 2 years into it, go through that process again. And that first bullet addresses that you can continue to use those textbooks previously approved until they become unserviceable. So it would be our decision at that point when they become unserviceable. Are they unserviceable because that review by the state board said ended up in them being removed, therefore we want to go back to that subject area, or do we determine that they still meet our curriculum and state standards in a manner that we're comfortably continuing to use them? And then I guess the second bullet there I wanted to point out too is that you will see the use of supplemental materials by teachers. Any of you or parents have seen work come home from your kids that isn't necessarily just from a textbook, and a lot of those materials that I didn't point out on that list, that example of approved math instructional materials. There are materials on there that are intended to be supplementary. So if you choose supplementary materials from there, if you notice on that aligned column, there are some that it doesn't say aligned, but they may have components within that are great resources for teachers to use. So those are some examples of how you would select a supplementary material to be used in our classrooms.
And to that level of supplemental, so how much latitude does an individual teacher have versus what was adopted by the district, what that list says as supplemental? Can they go away from that? Do they have to have approval from the administrator? Does each administrator see it specifically in the schools? For example, one teacher or group of teachers might use supplemental in Spring Creek and not in Elko, so on and so forth, or is it just to the individual teacher to what they see fit?
They should be working with their site administrator. And if those materials have to be purchased, they have to work with their site administrator to make that
Now,
purchase.
because of online access, I'm assuming it doesn't always get purchased per se.
And probably the key term in the NRS is in 389-880, textbooks adopted by the state board must be used in public schools in the state, and no other books may be used as basic textbooks. So that adopted textbook, that guides our curriculum. But there is leeway in materials to support
I'm talking
teaching
in
of
a
the
positive
standards.
way, especially maybe
Yep,
not in
mhm.
math, but in history or
Well,
political
and-
science. That way the teacher has their personal input, and that's why
Mhm.
every kid wants to go to this teacher versus this one, and so on
Yep.
and so forth.
And we'd all like to believe that Nevada state standards are the most important standards in the state, in the United States, but bottom line is textbook companies don't write textbooks specifically for Nevada state standards. So most likely, we're not going to find a textbook that is perfectly written for exactly every Nevada content standard. Therefore, teachers will need to utilize supplemental materials.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. So that was a really brief explanation of that process. I don't know if there's any more questions. The next part I wanted to get into for a quick discussion is just where we are now as a district. Are there any questions regarding what I've presented thus far? Standards adoption all the way down to textbook adoption.
So do you know what drove the change from the school district choosing textbooks and piloting them and then submitting them to now the state?
You know, I
selects
don't
them?
really know, and I didn't follow it much, honestly, as a principal. Paid more attention to the last year and a half when I moved to central office. I
What
will.
drove the change was changes in legislation
Okay.
that mandated the change from pre-2019 to what it is now.
Did it have anything to do with like the required test or the assessment tools that were being used?
You know, I'm not sure what the reasoning the legislature had behind the changes that they made, but
Okay.
it ultimately became NRS.
So are these state standards, are they like a first grader has to know, you know, X, Y, and Z at the end of first grade? Are those the basic standards, or is there way more involved in that than just where they need to be at the end of first grade?
There is more involved. And we can bring up that set of first grade math standards and zoom in a little bit and look at some of the standards, but they do include achievement indicators like you just mentioned, but that's probably a good page right there, CJ, if you want to zoom in right there. And scroll up a little bit to the blue. So this section of the first grade math standards is titled Operations and Algebraic Thinking. So ABC on down are each of the objectives included within the standard of operations and algebraic thinking. And then the numbers underneath them are what the kids are expected to do within, like, for example, within represent and solve problems involving addition and subtraction.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again that I've been asking for 2.5 years. And that is when we adopted the new state standards, the Nevada state standards in 2015, the teaching methodology changed at that time. Can you explain to me why that was when it's clear what they need to know are some simple mathematical operations? Why did the whole way we teach math, and I'm not sure about English and writing, but the whole way we teach math changed?
Common Core.
Does anybody know the answer to that?
I guess I would.
Mandated by the state, or is that something that just kind of trickled down from somewhere?
And I wouldn't say that how we teach math, for example, I was in a high school setting at the time, and I wouldn't say that how we changed math changed. Kids, the teachers were still teaching for students to be able to achieve the standards.
Well, I did a little homework over the weekend.
Mhm.
So here's my other question for you guys and for this board. It's clear, and these are the NAA standards only because those are the ones that go back furthest that I could find off of the state website. And if the trend everywhere is falling down, and especially in math, right at 2015 is where it falls off the cliff. Well, actually 2016, because it took a year, for kids to not understand how to do math anymore. But it's the trend in every subject that I graphed, and at the state level also.
Mhm.
It's not just Elko County. These are Elko County. And in some things, Elko County is actually doing better, like writing, for instance. The reading went down, but then it kind of leveled off. But I don't really qualify a 55% proficiency is that great, honestly.
Mhm. I don't either.
So my question to you and to this board is, why do we keep following the Nevada Department of Education? In the state, every other state almost, except maybe one, is doing better than Nevada in academics. 47. Okay, 47th. Oh, wow, we moved up a couple spots. So, so that's my question for everybody in this room, including this board. Why do we keep doing what the Nevada Department of Education is telling us to do? Why aren't we taking control over our curriculum to help these students achieve academic excellence?
And I hope that's that's the intent and the purpose of this presentation, is so we can move forward with choosing instructional materials that work for our kids.
Okay.
That's it?
If you'd like another presentation, or if you'd like answers to those questions, I don't have the answers to those off the top of my head.
I think we need to start thinking out of the box here, and we need to quit taking direction from the Nevada Department of Education.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd love to hear input from the other board members, if
Well,
anyone has any.
Go ahead.
Candace, I agree with you. There's been a loss of autonomy within the county as far as choosing curriculum. And as far as the math, there's a difference between instructional methods that teachers employ in the classroom and the curriculum that's chosen. And so, like you saw on some of those math standards there, they're very straightforward. Like the kindergarten ones are the ones I always reference, count to 1 to 100. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but teachers, whatever professional development they're receiving or whatever education that they're receiving, they assume that there's a certain way to teach it. And so some teachers teach the way that they learn. And so you get this manifestation in the classroom for whatever the teacher is doing for learning that material. Hopefully a teacher would give them lots of strategies to learn it. And then if the good old fashioned way of, doing longhand division works for that student, we should go with that. But that's, the biggest difference that I see with teachers is that they choose instructional practices that might not fit all students in their classroom.
Okay, but I think what's happened though, sadly, is that we've lost the majority and are now teaching to the minority. And I think that is a real issue we need to look at. I also would, and thank you for that, Mr. Zeisler, because one of the things that I wondered about, and perhaps you guys could help me out here, is can we change the training that our teachers are getting? We have many, many states out there that are doing way, way better than Nevada is. And can we look at what their training is and forget the Nevada state training and try to find some other training that might be more helpful to our teachers to help get our district back on track?
Mhm.
I think that the district has way more control over the in-service training and the implementation of the training sessions. Utilizing the graphs that you had right there, something that has concerned me for the last several years is our math textbook adoption. It's been put off. The Department of Ed has changed. Oh, we need to do science this year and social studies when it's in the rotation for the math textbooks. I think that when we adopted the English language arts textbooks, if you followed that, that's when we saw that not drop. It leveled off. And I think that we're going to continue to see it build at that particular point. But
And that would be those new adoptions there, is that correct?
Yeah, just to
For the-
to clarify the years highlighted in yellow, there used to be a mandatory set aside in the DSA for textbook adoptions for school districts, meaning money was partitioned off in the DSA when it came to a school district, and it was allocated only for the expenditures towards new textbook adoption cycles. If you're wondering what that 09-10 correlates to, it correlates to the recession. And at that time, the state legislature provided relief to districts on that mandatory set aside so that those monies could be used to maintain operations. That was good in the short term. I mean, it helped keep districts from laying off employees, for example. But everything catches up with you. And the downside of it is 4 or 5 years of nothing happening in the area of curriculum and textbook adoptions. And so we fully admit that we are well behind where we should be. We're behind the curve. I asked these guys to put this presentation together for you guys in preparation. Finance is willing to get back on track and get stuff moving back in the right direction.
Well, and I want to be clear, I'm not blaming anybody here, okay? I'm certainly not blaming our teachers. I'm not blaming our administrators. None of that. I'm just saying we are way off track. And it seems to me every time, whatever is coming down from the Nevada Department of Education is not working. And so we need to now turn this around and do something different.
We fully agree, totally agree with that assessment, and want to work with the board to get stuff pointed back in the right direction. It is not an overnight process. Textbook adoptions, they take a lot of time and they're tremendously expensive. And as everybody on the board knows, we don't have great news in terms of the new school district financing formula. So there's going to be a lot of challenges to this, but our intention is to get moved back in the right direction.
Okay, so I have a couple more tidbits I can show you. We touched on a little bit the state review of, we talked about state review of standards. The state's, textbook adoption department at the state, they also have a rotation where they are reviewing instructional materials. And as they do that, they update the list of approved materials. If you want to click that link, CJ. So we're going to be utilizing this in some manner to kind of determine what we move forward with as far as which subject we're going to adopt our next set of textbooks in. So you can see in 1920, they reviewed the textbook materials for computer science, next year's social studies, world language. Anyway, it goes through all of those, each of those years and what subject area they were reviewing textbook materials. We showed you there is an approved list of math materials. It's fairly lengthy right now. There's quite a few choices on there. Math is going to be reviewed and possibly additional material or textbooks added to that list in a couple of years. But as I mentioned earlier with the statute 389, I think it was 880, we don't have to wait till after that. We can adopt from the current list and not be in jeopardy of losing that textbook that we adopt in a couple of years. When at best, what's going to happen at that point in time is they're going to add more textbook choices to the list.
So am I off base thinking that if we were to go ahead and move forward with adopting a math textbook that was not on the list that's currently at the Department of Education, we're going to be finding ourselves going down the road, investing that money, and then having to reinvest money to adopt a textbook, a math textbook that's working, or is it approved by the Department of Ed?
It's approved by the Department of Ed. So a statute states right now that that textbook you're talking about would not be approved by the Department of Ed.
Okay.
But we currently have textbooks.
Yes.
Our math scores are not going up. They just continue to go down. Can't we just maybe form a curriculum committee to go back and reformulate the curriculum using the current textbooks that we have and get something? I mean, I don't see how we can push this another, what is it, 2-3 years down the road.
That's 22.
And we don't have to.
I say that's what they're recommending or whatever, but
So,
we can
so I
start
guess
that.
in a perfect world to have the highest multitude of choices, if we're going to use math as the example, all school districts in the state would adopt math textbooks in the 23-24 year, the year after the state committee reviewed new submissions by textbook publishers and possibly added some. That's the change that might happen to that list during the 22-23 or when they're reviewing, is that they might add more books, more textbook options to
Okay,
that
so
list.
but we can review the current list.
Yes.
And okay, I get you.
Yes.
All right.
In talking to math teachers in our district right now, we don't have a common textbook at every site, correct?
We do,
Okay, but they're not necessarily.
as far as
utilized,
what
or
has
they're
been
open.
adopted, we do. As far as
Okay.
what has been adopted, we do. But if you go back to the spreadsheet, CJ, I'm gonna look, I think it was 2008 or 2009 was when we adopted our current math. We purchased them in the 08-09 school year. 08-09 was the first year we started using this textbook.
But the way that textbook is being taught, doesn't that kind of go back to our individual teachers and their personal preference, and then also the training that we're providing to those teachers? Is that correct?
To a point, yeah.
The only dangerous part about that, if you have teachers using the curriculum with fidelity, you're talking about an individual who's paid maybe $80,000 a year to push a button for whatever the curriculum is saying. Here's the video you're going to show. Here's the worksheet that you're going to distribute. It removes some of that autonomy again in the classroom for the teacher to be able to differentiate that curriculum for those students.
And we do reach a limit with textbooks. Like, for example, we can't buy a replacement student textbook that was drafted in 08-09 anymore. So our kids are using books that in whatever shape they are, that's the shape they're going to be in, or they're going to get worse.
Yeah, I kind of have a problem with developing a whole curriculum around a textbook. You know, that really to me constrains the.
You know, there's additional options that have been out for a while with going the digital route. So, you know, there's pluses and minuses with anything though, but now that we're one-to-one, it maybe opens up a possibility to discuss moving to a digital type of textbook adoption where it's not a physical textbook that gets destroyed. It's a subscription you purchase, and then every kid has access to the textbook. But again, that it's probably more expensive than a physical paper copy of a textbook. All that would have to be investigated. But I mean, with one, you cure one problem, you create another one, maybe.
Well, and that's where we approach again on that ability for the teacher to go above and beyond or in some cases not. I'm assuming you have always both extremes, where I know some teachers, especially, let's take math again, where you have the textbook, but then he doesn't like or she doesn't like what the textbook's doing, or doesn't feel that her group of teachers, her group of students at that point will react well. So go to K12.com or whatever the math ones are online and pulls exercises and can help the students go above and beyond because that is working for them. It's kind of, and that's where I think we need to embrace the flexibility of the teachers because they're the ones with the children that actually understand. I'm sure during the pandemic, all of us have tried to explain simple math to our 6 or 9-year-olds. It's like, I don't understand why you're not understanding.
And Candace, you're totally right. You don't teach the textbook, you teach the standard. And all this stuff that we're talking about are ways for a teacher to use materials to support mastery of the defined standards. That's what we're after. What's being used, how it's being used, that's all up for discussion. But at the end of the day, what students in the state of Nevada are required to do is master the standards.
In 19, we bought English language art books that came with a digital. They come with it. How's
Probably digital support materials,
Yeah, I think they did.
like auxiliary
elementary,
things.
like 1 through 3 1 year, and then
Yeah, we bought elementary 17-18 school year and middle through high school, the 18-19 school year.
yeah, and it had a digital backup to it. Is that working?
You know, so at the high school level, when I was a principal, after we had adopted that, what I can tell you is it helps a ton. Most of the teachers are using the physical textbook with the kids in the classroom. It did help a ton when kids were absent, that teachers were able to email out the exact same page or the exact same lesson that was done. Because everything that is available in printed format, that the teachers have a file of digital format also for that textbook series.
The elementary version too. I spent the last 5 years in elementary. I heard lots of good feedback from the elementary teachers. Supplementary things and also help with differentiating for kids who needed a little bit of extra support, or maybe kids who were advanced and have the ability to do some different things for those kids that were on different levels. So I heard good positive feedback from elementary teachers.
So is there a process, for instance, for administrators, like if there are some classrooms that aren't getting it across for whatever reason to these kids and they're not excelling academically, what's that process look like?
That's part of data collection at the site to, we have different assessments, but we also get to the point we don't want to assess the kids to death either. But we assess kids and we can utilize that data to identify individual kids and groups of kids that are performing higher or lower.
Well, and I
We
will
also
just,
use interim assessments. We use the MAPS program to inform instruction at different intervals during the school year. And the purpose of that formative kind of testing program is, in fact, to inform instruction so that teachers know whether students are, in fact, mastering the standards that they're teaching. And if not, to incorporate appropriate remedial strategies so that they do.
okay, but I will say that I have heard from a lot of parents over the last several years that, and I'm going to go back to math because that's the one I hear about, is that parents don't know how to help their children with math because of the way it's being
Is this
taught.
mostly at the elementary level, Candace, or that you're hearing from?
I think that would be a fair
Mr.
assessment.
Smith and Mrs. Turnahue, could you come up and maybe speak a little bit to sort of the math curriculum in elementary and maybe enlighten some of the discussion?
Yeah, can you rephrase your question?
So I've heard, And when I was a substitute teacher, I said, plain on, kids were frustrated because they did not understand how math was being taught. And that, I'm not saying that's in every classroom in the district, but it was the ones that I was in. And I've heard from a lot of parents that they cannot help their children with their math homework at home because they don't understand the methodology that is being taught to these kids now after it, and it changed. It changed because I was there. It changed in 2015. And that's when the Common Core state standards were adopted in the state. And that's when the things shifted in math. And so parents are telling, what parents are telling me is, I don't know how to help my child.
And hi, I'm Candace Turneyhue. I am the new elementary director of education for Elko County. I was just brought on 2 weeks ago. I've had 16 years in Elko County. 15 of those years has been as an administrator. I was in Spring Creek Middle School, then I moved to Spring Creek Elementary. Then I went to Grammar for the past 3 years, and now I'm at Central. And I was here when we adopted those standards that we're talking about tonight in 2015. And what we noticed with the standards is that our current curriculum, it was more of, this is how you solve an addition problem, and it was one way. And that's how we learned in school. 2 + 2 is 4. Now what they want to teach the kids and what you'll find through the standards is more of a number sense, to where, okay, 2 + 2 is 4, but yes, so is 3 + 1, so is 0 + 4. And it just teaches different ways to look at those numbers. I myself have a hard time with that too. Our kids are
simple.
Are
But the
doing
problem
good
is
with
they tell you to give them the wrong answer. You give the kid the right answer working through the problem, and then you get that homework back and it's marked wrong because it's the right answer.
And they didn't do the process right, because I've got bubbles over
Yeah.
here and I've got bubbles over here.
Everybody,
You know what I mean?
everybody,
Yeah, it's-
please. We're given, the presentation is for general information, not for total interaction right here. And
right.
the presentation, is to get everybody to where you have a good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and where we can start to move forward with that. So if you would, please. Kind of.
But sometimes, Jim, we don't
Yeah.
give these opportunities to meet with them
I'm-
again. And you just have a question. We just.
That's what I noticed the most as a
We
building
can
principal.
teach our kids that there's multiple ways to get the same answer of 12. That's not the problem. The problem is you're telling a child to solve this problem. We help our child solve that problem. They get the correct answer, but for whatever reason, that's wrong. They can do the process the way the book said.
Yes.
And see, from what I understand too, is there's strategies, which you teach the kids different strategies.
And that's what we're talking
do
about.
that.
That's what Candace is saying.
But those, so strategies are failing.
Exactly.
That is what I'm trying to get
It's
to.
not working.
Those strategies are not working, so let's dump that and try something else.
I tried.
That's okay.
but-
Did you have anything,
But we
Ray?
can continue working with
That's
that
my
and having
understanding
these
too.
conversations
Try to
too.
get more of a
You're-
concept,
you're
an understanding of the concept and build on that. But obviously, it's
We're saying-
Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's get back on track here. Mr. Walls, are you at a point to wrap up?
So, and that pretty much wraps up. One thing I do want to say is that I do really feel like we, when we adopted our ELA curriculum a few years back, especially at the elementary levels, we followed that up with extensive professional development. That timing did coincide with the Read by 3 grant from the state. So we had some additional funding to provide that extensive professional development. But if you do look at our kids, especially at the elementary levels, ELA performance from about 2016 on, it increases every year district-wide. And I would agree with you, Candace. I think that those increases have more to do with professional development for teachers than the book they're looking at.
So my question then is, if we wanted to tackle math starting today and make changes to the way we're doing it so that we can start getting that graph to go back up, how long from today, if we started right now today, how long would it take for us to get something different implemented?
Something different, a different textbook or what are?
Different teaching methodology, teaching methodologies, whatever it takes. You know, whatever it takes to go back and revamp our math program to where parents can help their children and our children are learning.
Well, I think to develop that plan and the resources needed, a minimum of a year to develop that plan.
Why can't we look at schools that are actually succeeding
We can.
and model after what they're doing?
We can. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time we turn around, that's for sure. So what I'd like to see us do is on one of our next board meetings, start this process looking specifically at math, because I think we've been putting that off for several years. And I think that we need to get something established and really start to look at not only textbook, but the instructional materials and how those can be worked in to see if we can get some significant increases in student achievement with regards to that. So that would be, I'd like to put that on the agenda sooner rather than later in the next couple of meetings, that we get that ball rolling. We're roughly a month before school starts, and that'll give us somewhat of a head start, even though we understand that this process does take longer to implement. And we're jumping in, and we've already been behind for, as you can see, a number of years. So I'd like to take the conversation in that particular direction, if that's.
So what type of, do you want an informational item again, perhaps from math staff to explain math methods and how they interact with the standards? Do you want to start there? Or do you?
I'd like to have a two-pronged approach, going through what you just said, and also going through and starting to take a look at what the available textbooks that are adopted at the present time. What we've got, that the Department of Education has already adopted, and get some folks looking at that to see how it fits back in with the statement that you'd made right there. So,
Okay.
All right.
And Mike, along with that, I'd just like to see some of our math teachers come forward and say, these are things we need. You know, we feel like this is something we really need to improve math
I think it
at
would
whatever
be
level.
very informational for the board and the public to, I am unable to articulate it from a math teacher's perspective, but I think it would be very informative for the board to hear from a few math teachers at different levels about the current text that we have in math, how it's being used to support mastery of state math standards, and what are the barriers, what are the problems that they are seeing, in that successfully taking place. And then we go from there. Let's see what they say, because I wouldn't be telling you the truth if I, as I sit here now, knew what they would have to say on it. Maybe they're going to tell the board, you know what, this is a mess, and we need to do something different, so we can get different results. But you might hear the opposite.
Yeah.
We'll only know by getting some of them in here to talk.
Okay.
And I'm sure they will have some input from parents, because as a parent of, lots of children, I hear from my teachers, and I hope parents are always in contact with their teachers, but I know they'll have some things that say, they say we've done this, and, it has not helped our kids. It has not helped the parents to be able to help our kids. And we definitely want parental involvement in our district. So I'm sure they'll have some feedback on that as well, which I think would be helpful.
Okay.
And I
Other
do-
questions, Robert?
So seeing those trends are very disturbing, you know, seeing the drop over the last, you know, how many years. Why aren't we doing anything before this? Why are we waiting till now to do something? How come we weren't trying to get ahead of the ball instead of, you know, I guess I as a business owner, I look at, you know, accountability and, you know, making sure, you know, we're ahead of the game instead of behind the game. So what are we doing? I mean, why are we waiting so long to try to get our kids ahead?
I mean, there are,
Well, it's not overnight, but I mean, these trends are over years.
there's not
just overnight.
excuses, but there's issues related to cohort groups as they move from one grade to the next. There's problems with timing of state tests that create these graphs that Mrs. Wines is referring to. And like I said, we try to use interim testing, the MAPS program to inform instruction. They are supposedly aligned with state tests. Okay. And so they should do a good job, but the state test is given at the end of third grade, for example. Those kids are now gone to fourth grade, that it's done. So
why aren't we being better than the state? I guess that's my question too, is why can't we be ahead of the game?
we're
And not
sure,
behind
we're
us,
sure gonna try.
And, you know, what are we doing about it now instead of, you know, we should have been doing this years ago instead of now.
Well, as you can see, you've got the gaps in the system, and those gaps have helped to continue some of those problems. So, you know, I think that we're on the right, after the presentation here this evening, I think the board has a better idea of where we're at, how things fit together, and we can start to really focus and to increase those scores. Because I'd like to see an increase of 20+% with some of these test scores. And I think those are very achievable, but it's going to take some concentration and looking at the various things that are involved here, not only from the standard, but then with the curriculum material and the textbooks. I think they all play a major part in this thing. So
my question is, well, first of all, ballpark, obviously, because I'm sure every year is going to be different. What kind of investment are we looking at?
Depends on which area.
Let's take math, second grade math.
Well, it's hard to say. And I wasn't at Central when we adopted ELA. I know, for example, we did ELA over 2 years because of the cost.
So we're looking at 6 digits, or we're looking at 7 digits?
Oh, millions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're looking at.
So that brings me my second part of my question is, if we just change the book per se, but we're not changing anything else, how are we helping the teachers or the students?
And that was kind of why I gave the example of when we adopted the ELA series a few years back. And like I said, the extensive professional development that we provided along with the incorporation of that textbook, the professional development wasn't just how to teach page 32 in a textbook. It was how to teach Nevada state standards to kids.
Okay. And so as you pointed out before, the state standard is the minimum standard we have to abide by. We can go above and beyond, like Robert was saying. So I guess my last point is, how can we encourage the teachers to go above and beyond and give them the tools, obviously, because that's more the issue, is just as long as they have the tools to do it. And how can we move away, or some of the graphs, for example, or because we changed testing methodology as well, didn't we? How we test a kid is
The
different
test
now.
itself.
So maybe that's one of the issues too. Maybe we're not really, we're thinking that it's giving us more information, but it's actually distancing us from our children.
I mean, just the testing protocols is an issue in and of itself that we could spend hours talking about how they establish cut scores that determine whether people have in fact mastered stuff. Cut scores get moved. Therefore, a kid who was above that cut score last year, and they were deemed to have been proficient. With that exact
not
same
be.
score in the ensuing year, they're no longer proficient
Yeah,
because the bar got changed.
yeah. It's a very complicated
Oh, yeah, no, it's not.
situation. Yeah,
What my point was is we can't just throw money and expect it to change.
exactly.
We have to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support the teachers so that they can support our children. Same thing goes with, I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but when I was a kid, I remember you had to go home, do your homework, then you could go play. I don't recall the last time my kids actually had a whole bunch of homework sufficient enough to not go play. You know what I mean? It's and that's part of the being a parent. And it's not the school system, but it seems like back in the day, we used to do a lot more in school or around school, I should say, than now. It's if you finish your work at school, you don't have homework. So I'm wondering if we're not pushing the bar high enough, if we're just trying to hit the standard. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's achievement indicators for each standard too, as far as high achieving or exceed standards, meet standard, approaching standard, below standard. So even within the standard, you can measure a student who exceeds the standard and meets standard too. So
The way those charts are not exceeding a lot. I mean.
some kids
I think-
are and some
you know,
kids
and I
aren't.
think, you know, like Candace said, it's not working. Like our standard, you know, state standards down here, we should be up here. We're Elko County, we're better than the state standard.
And so I guess that's my question ultimately, is to ask you guys at Central and trickle it down to the administrators, who can trickle it down to teachers. Do they need more resources? Is that what is lacking at this point? Do they need more help to do the job and to connect more with the children? And if that's a tool issue, we can try to find ways, I'm sure, to get them these tools.
Like Mr. Cooney said, it's a complex set of interactions. I could provide the board with all kinds of examples of what I mean by this, but we had a school who in 1 year was deemed to be, by the state measures, among the lowest 5% performing schools in the state. The very next year, it was a blue ribbon school. Nothing had changed in that school other than the way it was measured. So,
Well, okay.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Wiles and Mr. Anderson. That was a very helpful presentation. It certainly helped me understand, you know, some of the things that we're dealing with and
these are processes we need to go through, and we want to put ourselves in a situation where we're not just coming to you guys at the end of the process and you weren't aware of how we came to that determination, that recommendation.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. With that, this was a non-action item, informational. And so we're grateful that we've got as many people here to have listened to this particular presentation. Moving on to item 1.06, receipt of a presentation regarding the district school improvement process for the 21-22 school year. This kind of falls together.
I would say to the board that once again, the process for accountability and school and district improvement processes have evolved in the state. And I think it will be very educational and informational for you to hear this new process and what it looks like, because it's integral in everything that was talked about in the previous item.
Mr. Anderson.
Sir, good evening, everyone. Hello, nice to be with you here.
Rolls.
Yes, Keith's, my finger gets a rest and Keith gets to work his out now. So I am CJ Anderson, probably a little less known among everyone because of my newness here, but very grateful to be here. My new role here at the district is the Director of School Improvement. And so obvious correlation with what I'm going to be talking about today. So very recently, we have something new that we're going to be doing this year. Well, the idea of a continuous improvement process is nothing new, and you'll find that with lots of things in education. We repackage, we think about things differently. Sometimes things get presented differently. So the concept of being continuously improvement minded is not new. But this thing called the CIP beta is an actual like branded name of something we're going to be working on. Okay, so this is new this year, and I'm going to be just giving you a kind of an overview on what that's going to look like as we go through that this year. So I'm going to walk you through some of the hows and the whys behind the changes that have been made. We've always done school improvement plans. That's something we've had to do for decades, right? But that's just something we submit and we work on every year. But some whys and hows of the changes that are being made, and what you see on the right-hand side there are the main ideas we're going to focus on during this presentation. So we're going to talk about how we got to where we are now, how we're going to focus more on school improvement, what the CIP expectations are, what the process is, the SPP development. I'll describe those acronyms in just a moment. How we're going to increase stakeholder involvement and communication in regards to these items, and just how much more of an ongoing process it's expected to be. So I guess a good question to ask is, why are we here and why is the process changing? Instead of having a school performance plan that got established at the beginning of the school year and then largely just, we turn it into whoever we turn it into and then it just sits there. The State Department of Ed wants to have the school performance plan be something more involved, part of a larger continuous improvement process that is always ongoing during a school year and even spans across school years, which is essentially the definition of continuous improvement. So we have a marriage of statewide collaboration and design thinking. So this new continuous improvement process, and so I'm going to be saying CIP a lot because that's less of a mouthful. So this CIP beta and the school performance plan roadmap, and I will probably say SPP or just roadmap, but that's what I'm referring to, were developed through collaboration, research, and testing. The Nevada Department of Ed and district partners committed to a process of reimagining the comprehensive needs assessment and school performance plans. So there was like a process in how they got to where we are with this new thing that I keep teasing. We'll get there before too long. So they claim to have started from a place of empathy, and I know that sounds like real touchy-feely, but essentially what they're saying and what I'm saying they did is, before getting into this huge process that everyone's going to have to go through, there's considerations taken into place of, if this is the mountain we have to climb, what sort of gear are we going to need to climb that mountain, right? So how can we set people up to not only do this, have the tools to do this great thing, but accomplish this thing? So they considered all that as they developed this process. Next up is they combined ideation and prototyping. That, in better, easier terms, means that they did a lot of research and looked into continuous improvement, national best practices and methods, and specifically the two that were, and if you'd like, we can zoom in on those and see more what those entail. But there were two major studies done. One was called the 4 Domains for Rapid School Improvement, done by West Ed, and then the other one. Just go back on the arrow, Keith. The other one is called the District and School Improvement Framework for Systematic Improvement. That was done by a company called AIR. So those were kind of the guiding principles and core tenets, and however you want to phrase that, for how they developed the framework that we're going to be looking at. So after doing all that research, considering what it's going to take to make this happen, they came up with various prototypes of what that might look like specifically in the context of public education in our state. After looking at all those prototypes, they came up with a very specific pilot program. So they took that synthesized data and research, made a pilot version of the CIP and SPP roadmap, and those were presented to the state for piloting, and that happened starting kind of middle of last year and through the spring. 20 different schools from 7 different districts participated in this pilot last winter and spring. And among those 20 schools were 3 from our school district. Mountain View Elementary participated in this, Sage Elementary participated in this, And I also took part in it as the principal of Wells Combined School last year. So 3 of our schools engaged in this process. Not the entirety of the process, but we got like a taste of it. I should clarify that. So after conducting the pilot, the schools and districts provided feedback, turned in their products, and just generally gave feedback on the portion of the CIP that they were able to engage in. The state, district, and school entities, among that feedback, all of that was kind of compiled into 3 very distinct needs to support them. If we're going to keep doing this in the future, this is what we're going to need. So need number 1 was, and I'll just read that part. It says comprehensive school improvement tools and clear processes create consistency and streamline the work for local and state stakeholders. In a nutshell, that means the organization of the steps and of the process with clear timelines, clear requirements, less of a free-for-all when it comes to making a school performance plan. Need number 2 is that we would be given tools and guidance that reflect that national research and best practices, as well as shared values around equity. So that gives us our steps through the process and resources using that best practice and research. The last need was tools that can be used throughout the school year to empower us to do meaningful work, not just come up with something a different way, but do it in a more meaningful method. As you're going to see in a few minutes when we go through, you're going to see what looks like a lot of work and a lot of preparation throughout the process on the part of the CI team and school leadership. As this is the case, this consulting firm that they worked on this with called UPD, they have provided for school administrators and the CI teams a wealth of resources and tools to help us through each step of the process that I'll detail for you. Among those tools, we have orientation and trainings that have been going on and will continue to go on as we go into the school year and all throughout the school year as we get to each milestone. Planning and implementation checklists for facilitation leaders, guides for each event, slide decks, pre-made handouts, outreach surveys, communications templates. They've really, I don't have the whole, it's called a Padlet that we have online as school leaders to look at and access these resources. And there's an abundance of things there that we're able to use and get familiar with, which will help guide us through that process. They've really given us a lot of tools to start this with. Doing good, Keith. Keep going. There you go, right there. All right. So as I've stated, and you see at the top here, this is called a continuous improvement beta. And so beta, right? Like we all might be wondering why it's called a beta. So that is because we are currently existing in a beta. Go ahead and click on to the next one. Naming the process, and this is very transparent from the state and from the firm that they're working with, that by naming it the beta, we understand that even though this is year 1 of implementation, that it is a version that is intended to get input, transform either at the end of the year or throughout the year or both. But it's going to evolve as we figure out by doing it at a widespread level that, hey, we need to fine tune this. This can be better this way. So we hope to make it better as we do it this year. We're going through it as a state. We have a shared value of taking those risks, you were talking before about moving beyond that status quo. That's the goal of this, is improve and go beyond just good enough for the state, right? That's what we're hoping for. Extensive training and support is already being presented and is going to continue. I mentioned that a little earlier. And just in a nutshell, we just know this is going to be a learning process throughout the year. So, and the state has been kind in saying, we will get that there are hiccups. No one's going to get killed this year for messing up on their process if something gets, out of order or that sort of thing. Everyone's learning together as we do this. All right, so I've been talking about this process and I've mentioned events and things like that. So let's talk about what the actual process at a school level is going to look like. So at first I thought it was kind of corny, but now my mind can't think of it in any other way because of how much I've looked at it. And there are 3 specific acts that go into the continuous improvement process, and there are 9 events within those 3 acts. So Act 1, titled Setting Our Course, very specifically is to, let's just go ahead into it, is to organize your school your school team and to start to develop your school performance plan roadmap. And the culmination of Act 1 is to have your physical or digital copy of this school performance plan roadmap in your hand. So that you'll notice, well, there's only 9 events. You go back in there, Keith. Yeah, stay there. Just use the arrows. So event 1, go ahead. Very specifically is called your CI team kickoff. Ideally, or as an estimate, they assume each one of these events is going to take roughly 90 minutes. Could take more, could take less, just depending on the needs of your campus. But you do a team kickoff, and the objectives or the goals of that team kickoff is to first bring your team together, Avengers Assemble type situation, and start to learn the roles, begin to develop trust and a shared understanding of each other, work with one another, review and determine what data you're going to collect to develop your goals, and to establish a plan and a timeline for the data collection. And that brings us, and that's supposed to happen now through August. So as principals have started to come back to work, they are supposed to start to form their team and plan that first meeting where they can start to do this. So event 2 is then your outreach session. This is a mandatory part of every school improvement plan process, and that is to, let me scroll up here. It is to inform school partners, go back, of the CIP beta. So let the community know this is what we're doing, transparent. Gather partner feedback from the parents and community members at that meeting. Continue transparency between our improvement process and the community. And note that as we go through other parts of the project, this process, that we will be keeping them informed all the way along. It's not a one-time meeting thing, and then it's on the website if you want to see it. We will be communicating throughout the year to let you know how we're doing, how we're progressing, how it's going. Event 3 is a data analysis and needs assessment dialogue. So what we do here is we take the data from event 1 that we determined we were going to find and collect, that we presented to the community during the outreach session. We take the feedback from the community where there were surveys, where they talked about the data together. So kind of like we all impromptu looked at our district's math data, we would do that as a campus and a school community. We would look at that data and talk about why we think what's happening. And you take all of that data from events 1 and 2, and in event 3, you develop specific descriptive problem statements, and we develop goals, smart data-informed goals. So that is the what. Now, this part for me anyway, when I look at what's so different about this, not a lot of it is different. It looks different, but for me, this is something that is very different from previous years. In previous years, most of your campus goals, I bet if you would go look at school performance plans from previous years, a lot of them say our goal number 1, we're going to achieve X% of proficiency in ELA. Goal number 2, we're going to perform or achieve X proficiency in mathematics. And maybe one other, okay? So what the new process requires is that you look at your school as a whole. What other things affect student achievement? Because we know that there are a lot of factors that go into student achievement. Some are more crucial than others, and some have a greater impact than others, but all those things matter. Just tonight, I've heard people talk about the social, emotional learning and well-being of our students. That is an inquiry or a subtopic of inquiry area 1. You talked about adult learning culture, that under inquiry area 2, instructional practice or systems and structures that support. So a lot of the things we've talked about tonight reside within one of these inquiry areas. And I can't just say as a school, well, forget 2 and 3, I'm all about inquiry area 1. I have to come up with a goal or 2 for each one of those 3 inquiry areas. So anywhere from 3 to 6 goals, that'll be up to the site-based committee to decide how many goals they're going to have. But they will be looking at each of those inquiry areas. For clarification on inquiry area 3, because that one sometimes leaves a little bit of what does exactly that mean. Connectedness in a nutshell means how the different stakeholders and participants in the school experience that school. So how are students experiencing their school? How are staff experiencing the school? And how is the families and community around that school experiencing that school? And there's supposed to be a goal there every year.
who's driving this? The administrators, the on-site administrators?
Yes, so what I'm sharing with you today is the individual school performance plan process and continuous improvement process. So this would take place at the school level. Now, in my role and what I do is I am here to support and assist and provide whatever I can to each of the school principals and continuous improvement teams to make sure they're not only going through this process correctly, but also making sure they have what they need to conduct it and fulfill it.
So I guess my question is, so you do supersede and you supervise this whole process?
I wouldn't say I do all by myself. We are a curriculum team of directors up here, and we will all work together to make sure our campuses have what they need.
Because just the third question, the third area, I should say, when staff. So for example, if you have an administrator who is not amazing at his job or her job, and there's a conflict between staff and them, that how do you get that feedback? How do you know it's 100% feedback instead of just like, oh, I filled it up here, just take it. I don't want to deal with you.
No, that's a great question, Mr. Gerber. I mentioned that I went through this process last year, at least part of it anyway. And I do recall the exact moment when I was going over the inquiry areas with my team. And it was an awkward moment where, because I think most of the people there liked me, but I also wondered, hey, are they going to say our administrator that, like for inquiry area 2, our instructional leadership, that's what we want to focus on. Yeah, that's an odd moment, but I can say that in that moment, I, as an instructional leader and a professional, was ready to take that recommendation. If that's what the team wanted, we really think we could do more work in that area because, by all rights, I was a second-year principal. I was still sort of new to the community. I was ready to accept that recommendation. And I would hope that all of our administrators are also professional enough to listen to their team that they've gathered. That's how I would answer that.
I do recall you coming to meetings, and I do recall you being very passionate. So kudos in that aspect of your staff in your school and your community. But I just worry that sometimes maybe some might fall through the cracks. And I just want to make sure that there is a fallback. And if it is a community and a group, maybe it helps. Just some teachers might not feel comfortable coming forward. Let's put it that way. I'm just trying to cover my bases. I'm not pointing.
I understand you. I don't think there is a set or established way to put that check. There's no like anonymous within the team. There's no anonymous way. Although, you could do that. You as a principal could say, hey, as a team, we are going to let's vote on which areas we need to anonymous survey, quick, 4 questions. Which ones do we want to work on? That would be a way to do that. And I would encourage anyone who's on a team to, if that's their concern, to say, hey, I'd like to vote on these anonymously. Let's do it with anonymity so we can figure out which goals we want, and then we'll work together through those goals as a team. There is some autonomy in how you carry this process out. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Mr. Anderson, is this going to replace the rubric that the administrators do now for their strategic planning?
Do you just mean like that PDF document that's got the colored blocks that go all the way down? Yes, the final product in event 5 will replace that document. It's just a different looking document.
All right, thank
with different processes to get there. So those are the inquiry areas, and that will address the school as a whole a little, I think, a little better. It has potential to do that anyway. So event 4 is called a root cause analysis. So in event 3, we talked about the what do we want to do and where are we at? Not analyzing quite why yet, just this is where we are. Event 4 is where we start to focus on why. How did we get here? That's when we can start to talk about kind of some of the things we were talking about earlier. How did we get here? What's causing this? And what strategies are we going to use at our campus to change that and put it in the direction we want it to go? And they develop those solutions and strategies that they believe are going to put the ship in the direction they want to go. I have neglected to mention the timelines of each one. Hopefully you've noticed, though, here we are at event 5 and we're still in September. So if you did not catch one of the ones from before, it's all happening kind of in August, September. Event 5, very, very simply, not a whole lot to say. Event 5 is to take everything you've done in 1 through 4 and put it into the SPP roadmap. It is to finalize that document. That is where we make sure that document looks real nice and pretty. If people are smart as they're doing it, they'll kind of insert those things along the way and then maybe just use that time to pretty it up and make sure it all accurately reflects what the team has talked about. But that is the purpose of event 5. The hope is by the end of September, we have our school improvement plans in place. We don't have to submit them yet, but that is when they need to be ready to go and in place.
That has to be submitted to the Department of Ed?
Yes, sir. So those plans will be collected by me/us from each of the school sites, and then I/we will submit those to the Nevada Department of Ed.
And do you have something similar for district-wide?
Excellent question, Mr. Gerber. This year we do not. In one of my most recent trainings, it was made clear that that is the next step of this. They're still in working with this firm, and they did not want to throw a district improvement revamp at the same time that they threw campus improvement revamps. So for this year alone, we will be going through year 1 of the school performance plan roadmap beta, CIP beta, SPP roadmap change. And then supposedly next year, 22-23, we will be embarking on a district version of that same thing. And then obviously, when it gets to that point and we have that established and that well under control, then you would always want those school ones to tie in and reflect what you're trying to accomplish as a district as well, and vice versa.
And can an administrator use, and I'm talking about the future at this point, so not to burden every year, can they kind of use what they had last year more? Can they build upon every year on what they had, or do they have to start from scratch every year?
Full of great questions. You're ahead too. Yes. So year 1, there is a lot, and you pointed it out, we're jumping ahead, but year 1, at the year 1 conclusion kind of turns into the start of year 2 and so on and so forth. So when we get to event 9, I won't spend a lot of time on it when we get there, but at the end of, when you do event 9, you're essentially taking care of a lot of event 1 and 2 for the following year. And you're prepping yourself for what is going to end up being your community outreach event in 2. And then you're jumping right into 3, 4, 5 again. Yep.
So talking about next year with that blanket one for the district, what if the state pushes it out another year or another year? I mean, I'd like to see it next year, no matter what. I mean, so we're not getting, again, let's set our standards higher than the state and, not push it off another year.
Absolutely. Mr. Smith and I actually were discussing this today. And so while we wouldn't have, because obviously with this process, they give you a new template. They give you new resources. They give you new guidance, facilitation guides and things like that. We obviously wouldn't be able to do that because we wouldn't have that template or format. But having gone through this process for a school, I'm sure we can start to guess that the inquiry areas will be very similar, that we can start to look at that. And should we arrive at a point where we're going into next year, even though we would have to continue to use whatever previous model existed, there's no reason we can't set whatever goals we want. That is entirely that's always been up to us, how we set a goal. So might be a good idea if there's some gum in the gears and they're not quite ready and they want to wait another year, we can go ahead and
I just don't want to keep pushing
adjust
it
our
off
goals.
and then in the same spot we're in now.
Yeah, I don't see why not. So Act 2, called Navigating Our Course. This will go faster. Event 6. I'm actually a little behind on my screen. Keith is doing great though. So event 6, this is a very simple example of what sort of discussions are going to happen. I guess I need to back up a little bit. So all of these events are to do the following things. So 6, 7, and 8 are the same exact thing. We just do it 3 different times throughout the year. They're called SPP status checks, and they are to accomplish the following: understand progress, quality, and impact of the strategies we talked about, use data to monitor progress toward our school goals, identify what challenges are in our way, because, best laid plans, right? We think this is going to happen and wow, something got in our way. So talk about those things and then clarify what next steps we're going to take. And you'll notice that first one happens in November. That's only about a month removed from the original plan. And I equate that to something along the lines of, you don't want to wait If you're building something, you don't want to wait till you're screwing the knobs on the drawers to find out that the drawers don't fit in the gaps, right? So at the beginning of the process, once we get going, we do a quick status check. Is this even going to pan out? Is this plan going to be good, or is this already a wreck? And do we need to change things now before we get, like you said, too far into it? Then the next one happens again in January, and the one after that is at the end of the year. So as the year goes on and we feel better about our plan and the direction we're heading, the status checks don't happen as frequently. We make sure we're headed in the right direction early. So here, that's tough to see, but I'll just summarize for you essentially. So that little thing, that's for one goal. So if you have 3 goals, you'll do this 3 times. If you have 6 goals, you're going to do that 6 times during that event. And you're going to list what strategies you were going to do for that goal, what the outcomes you wanted to have were, what lessons you've learned, what next steps do we take, and what do we need to make that happen? And you do this check, you communicate that with your school, your CI team. That team could let us know as directors and district administrators, hey, we need this. How can you help us? How can you help us progress along this in order to achieve our goals? And so they would do that 3 times throughout the school year, or 2 times throughout, and then once at the end to see how we did when we're in June. Every time they do one of these, it is to be not only added to the plan that is posted for everyone to see on the website, but also communicated to the community. We did a progress check. Our CI team met. We did a progress check. This is where we are. Feel free to review the document and present that out in community outreach to make sure everyone's filled in all along the way.
What's the incentive or sanction?
I'm sorry.
What incentive do they have to reach the goals? What sanctions do they have if they don't reach the goals?
Largely, school improvement is the incentive, is to make your school a better place for kids to go to school. I guess there are other types of things, like you get a better school rating if your school's doing better, right? But at the core of it, I should care about my kids' social emotional learning and make sure they're doing better there. I should care that their math is getting higher.
I always see the one who doesn't, who's just writing it out.
Yeah.
So because we send it out to the state, obviously.
Yes.
So are they going to have more control over our schools?
This is for us just to inform them of what we're working on.
Okay, so not like grants. They can't say, well, this school's failing with their goals, we're pulling the grants, or.
Not any more than in previous years. So I guess the typically when something goes wrong and your school is going low, and Mike referenced before having schools with extra low ratings, like, yeah, you'll get a 1 star. And then along with that have always come inherent things like, okay, we're going to be monitoring more to make sure we're carrying the process out with fidelity. But there's nothing stipulated in there that if your school hits X star, you don't meet these goals, that such and such thing is going to happen. That's not part of this. This is a process targeted at seeking and gaining improvement for your individual campus and later your whole district.
You raised your hand. Okay.
Oh.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
are we doing this? Okay.
No, she was just with Central, so I was wondering if there was answering a question with the grant.
No.
The goals that each school sets, are these measurable, or are they just, rememberable?
Gotcha. All right. So I'll answer that question. Earlier, I mentioned that I think I used 2 phrases. I used data-driven and SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym. The M in SMART stands for measurable. So yes, the goals should be measurable. And every goal that you establish you will have to have some both formative and summative way of deriving data to assess how well you did there. So for example, if it's a I'm not going to do that one. Let's go with connectedness from students at the school. There is a survey that students take where they say how I feel safe, I feel this, I feel that, I interact this way with the school. It's totally unanimous, anonymous, I apologize. And that would be an example of data you would use to see how you did as a school on student connectedness. And you could compare that with the previous school year when they took that. Are they feeling more connected now, or less, or the same? So yes, there always has to be data tied to whatever goal you are making and working toward. The last act is one singular event, and it is event 9, which is wonderfully titled Reviewing Our Journey. And this one, curiously, at first I thought curiously, but it makes sense, actually doesn't happen until August. And a huge motivation for that is, as we know, we don't get all of our student performance data until later in the summer. So go ahead and click forward, Keith, so they can see that a little more clearly. So just like with the status checks, there's like a chart you do for every goal. The same thing happens at event 9. And those are the questions you ask yourself and things we put in. And then, as you can see there, next steps and needs. This is where we were talking earlier, Mr. Gerber, about how we transition that into to the next year. And you can say, you know what, we made really great progress, but we're not where we want to be yet. So let's keep going with this. And we're moving in the right direction. So we must be doing something right. Let's keep going. But what do we need to do it better? How do we keep it going in the right direction? Or you can say, hey, that was a total disaster. We're going to scrap that goal altogether and try something else. Or that was a total disaster. What are we going to do differently? What other strategies are we going to try? And you use the lessons learned from that year to inform how you're going to approach the next year. And I mentioned earlier that it helps inform acts 1 or events 1 and 2 of Act 1. So that is an overview of that process. I just wanted to highlight a few more things and just talk about those key takeaways. Number 1, very data oriented, whether it's the initial processes or how we evaluate how well it functioned. Data is always there in the mix. Focuses, as I mentioned earlier, because of the inquiry areas, focuses more on the whole child and the whole school environment. From my perspective, I think it's got more stakeholder involvement and communication. A couple of neat things, and this will be nice news for principals and even stakeholders who've had to be on committees before. If a school is identified as Title I or a CSI school, or if they're undergoing accreditation, this is a very involved process. And to say, hey, on top of that, I also need you to do, this thing and this thing and this thing. They have incorporated all those things into this process so that if you were a Title I school, event 2 serves as your parent meeting for Title I. You put that in there. Your CSI updates that happen throughout the year, those are already built in now. Accreditation, if you're going through accreditation as a high school that year, you don't have to do this SPP plan process quite the same. You're already going to be doing it as accreditation. So they don't add extra work if you have these other identifiers on your campus, which is, I don't know, from having just come out of a principal role, I like the sound of that. And then, sorry, and just last bullet point, and then, is that okay? All right. And then I want to highlight again that this is truly intended to be an ongoing process that spans not just the year, but through subsequent school years, solely with the goal of continued improvement, not a flash in the pan now and then on to the next thing. We're looking to continually progress all throughout. And hopefully that achieves that. Yes.
My last question, because this is very exciting, is you said event 6 is basically a recap for each school to do it several times a year. Are you going to give us a presentation every 3 months, every quarter, saying this is where the district's headed, this is where the problem schools are, or not problem schools, but?
Do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
So, we met today, the initial thought was to bring schools up to the board, select schools from different levels, and give presentations to the board, unpack what they're doing with regard to this improvement process so you can see it, how it unfolds in real time in a real school. Like CJ says, there will be bumps in the road. Things may not go as planned, but you guys will be able to see through the eyes of a school improvement team what the challenges, what the accomplishments, what the barriers are to this process. I think it'd be valuable for both the schools and the board to see that. It will get you guys more acquainted with SMART targets or SMART goals. It will get you guys more acquainted with how specific increases in student achievement, both from a testing standpoint, but from the social emotional standpoint, formative, summative tests would be in that survey information, qualitative, quantitative information, both, and give you guys a really good flyover of what's going on in our schools. And that hasn't occurred for some time.
Just a good little snapshot, seeing what schools
Yeah.
my children might be more comfortable in Elko and Spring Creek, or the outer skirt schools that do we need more improvement or more tools in that sense. So no, it's something very good. Thank you.
You know, the other thing it will, I think, help is while we certainly pride ourselves that every school is a little bit different, all of our communities have different things going on in them. One size doesn't necessarily fit all, but we also know that if a school is having success in an area, we want other schools to know about that so it can be replicated. And so the process of having schools come forward and share successes and failures adds a lot to where our other schools can learn and what they can derive from that. So I think that sharing part is super important to getting rubber on the road, because I would be the first person to admit I've watched 29 years of school improvement plans be developed with the best intentions, printed on a color printer, filed on a shelf, and never looked at again for 12 months. The thing that's exciting about this is it drives engagement. You're not allowed to print something and put it on a shelf and ignore it. And so we're excited about it. And I think, by the way, these guys did an outstanding job presenting this new process to the board and to the community tonight. So thank you.
Yep.
And we talk about site committees, you know, at all the different sites. Are we going to have committees like the high schools or the elementary or junior highs working together?
That will come down the road. That will come down the road.
Just to share, you know,
yes.
info.
So something that wasn't within this presentation and but Mike reference that'll come down the road is we want people to get a grasp on how to do this process. But what kind of once you've not mastered, but got a grasp on this, there are different ways to kind of engage in the process that this UPD corporation suggests if schools, districts or individual schools are willing to do it. And they have suggested such things as tracking this through shadowing certain students and how they did, like trying to gauge this process from the perspective of a student. That's an option. They have it from doing it through like sister school type things like you've talked about. So you could have a high school cohort, you could have a combined schools cohort, you could have a K4 cohort, right? Or all elementaries. There's different ways of approaching it. I think most importantly, though, is for this year, we're going to make sure people know how to do it. And I just want to reiterate that throughout this whole process, not only will we be providing ongoing training and check-ins with the schools to make sure everyone's okay doing this and that they're making progress, but that'll also help us gauge how they're doing and who would be good to talk to you about that and how it's going and share successes with you. That'll inform us as to how it's going at each campus. So we're not just finding out at the end either.
And is the PTA invited to these committees or no?
So the committees are, depending on if you're secondary or elementary, there are certain required members that have to be on the committee, including, you know, teachers, parents. At secondary, a student is required to be on the committee, and that will be up to the discretion of a site administrator on who they invite. But typically, I don't know, just speaking from my experience, the guidance there is always have as widely represented a group as you can. I know on mine, the one I just finished last year, there was, you know, because it was a combined school one. I had elementary, I had middle, I had high school, I had parents from each of those. I had a custodian, I had substitute teachers that, you know, were there frequently. I had my counselor, I had my vice principal. I'm probably leaving off one or two, but it ended up being over a dozen people, 14, 15 people. And if I recall, and you just try to widely represent that and not only those roles within the community, but also just, you know, the other demographic breakdowns you have within your school population. You always want to try to equally represent as much as possible. So all opinions are heard.
This may be a question for you. Are these going to be used going forward, like for reviews for principals, vice principals as measurement?
Yeah, you know, there is a process in the state of Nevada where administrators are evaluated according to a certain set of prescribed standards. And certainly this process fits in, it will be part of that. But they will not be evaluated per se just on the plan. It's
an added tool.
It's
but it
part,
won't be-
yes.
Very good. I really am anticipating here in the short term with the timelines of getting some of these plans put together. We're going to be getting some feedback, not at the end of the year, but rather
Now you
here
guys will
in,
you'll have a presentation. I'll have to get, so I've memorized CJ's acts and what dates they
September.
fall on,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you'll
We'll give
get
you a
some-
separate training,
September.
Mr. Smith.
some kind of presentation probably in October
Okay.
about sort of where things are at with a few of the schools. And it will
Okay.
be a sampling, you know. What I would like you guys to see is what this looks like in an elementary, a combined, a junior high, and a standalone high school.
As long as it's not more of a burden for the administrators and the teachers. I think that's the key takeaway. And like you were saying, if it's a special school, they take some elements away. So
And I think by waiting till October, like Mr. Smith said, that we've afforded them an opportunity to get all the way through Act 1. They have their roadmap developed. They've kind of worked out those kinks. They probably be, and the more consistently, they all should be around the same place with so much variety and when 1 through 5 can get done. Someone could be on 4 and someone else on 2. But by the end of September, we should all be done with 5.
And if they're too stressed out, we'll move it to November.
Yep.
We'll give them a little bit more time.
Flexibility.
Well, I'm excited to see this plan, actually, because I think it does address a lot of the issues that we discussed here tonight. I'm really excited, though, that this board is going to be hearing throughout the year how it's moving along, rather than waiting until a year or 2 down the road to find out what the results were. But I did have a question for you back on like slide 2 or something. You talked about the values around shared equity. Can you explain to me what's meant by that, or define equity as it relates to this plan?
So in full disclosure, that I'm trying to find where that was. That was something that I pulled from it's like a guidance document that UPD shared with us about the beta process. So that was more about how they developed the template that we have and how they developed the process. I didn't get intensive information on what that means, how they incorporated equity, just that they wanted to make sure everyone knew that was something that's important to them as well. And so that's the extent of some of that stuff on there was quoted from a document.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah. So Mr. Anderson, is this a switch then at the state with these acronyms? So if I were to search at the state for an improvement plan, it's going to be a continuous improvement plan rather than a SIP or an SPP?
So 2 acronyms, continuous improvement process, which encompasses everything we talked about, like just trying to get better. And then if you were going to look for the name of the plan, it is the School Performance Plan Roadmap, or the SPP Roadmap. That is, from my understanding, what they are calling it now.
So if I'm a parent,
That's what
I
I'm calling
search
it.
SPP rather than
SPP Roadmap.
CIP.
I would specifically make sure you put roadmap in there. SPP Roadmap.
And then I have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Sorry. Going back to the incentives for the school, then a lot of this, it sounds like, is accountability issues. So my question was about the presentations, and those presentations being done here, I think allows for that incentive and accountability. I don't think anybody's going to want to come in front of us and show that all of your goals haven't been met. And so I think there's some accountability for schools. Plus, as some of you have mentioned, you mentioned that there is some pride in those schools and having those ratings and wanting to improve. So I'm really happy to hear that we'll be doing those. Access to plans, are those going to be on school sites or district site?
Part of the requirement of this is as soon as the roadmap is done, that is posted to every campus's website. We at the district level would link to that for every campus as well, in case someone isn't familiar with their own campus website. And then, like I said, all throughout the process, every time you make a change, that document, it's a Google Doc and you update it and everyone else can view it. And then you notify everybody when that happens. And
so we've engaged in some standardization of individual school websites. You know, they used to
Right, I saw
be
that.
sort of a
yeah.
hodgepodge. So when this is all up and running, there will be sort of a standard way that people can go to an individual school site and access this and find it. It won't be hidden on Spring Creek High School's page in some place that's different from Carla.
yeah, under community versus under our school versus under something else. It'll all
Right.
be uniformly in the same
But
place.
do parents still have access to the old plans then via school websites if they were already uploaded to those?
Yeah, we'll
those
make sure
websites for the
that,
district
that there's
plans?
archived material if it currently exists.
Okay. Have you considered too, like at each of the school site open houses, soliciting individuals to be some of the partners in this process, from parents to?
I think that would be a strategy that a site admin could use to, although, I mean, I guess at this point, if I'm thinking about the timeline, by the time you have a school open house, your team should already be convened and you should already be working on event one. If I were in that position. But again, there is, even though this is a uniform process, there is autonomy at the school level. A school principal can decide how they would like to gain participation. They can do a survey looking for people who are interested. They can ask specific people that they know would be interested. They could ask specific people that they think would be valuable to
And that
provide
leads
input.
me to my next question
Mhm.
is, what I see on those SPPs all the time is the same individuals that are contributing to synthesizing those. And I'm wondering if we can have other individuals added or change out some of the people who are normally involved in that process to get some more perspective on what's going on in those schools.
We've, encouraged broad participation of faculties for a while, and I'm not saying it's occurring everywhere, but it has been encouraged because we've seen the same thing, that the same 4 or 5 individuals are engaged in every aspect of what's going on in a school. And, we all know human nature. People have to, if they're going to perform highly, they have to feel valued. To feel valued, you got to engage them in something meaningful. And so that's a priority of ours, to broaden the level of engagement of our faculties.
Good. Okay.
It's something I'll encourage because it's something I tried to practice, and I'll encourage principals to do the same.
Excellent. And then my last thing is just a comment. Thanks for the presentations, both of them, because it's finally feeling like we're back to focusing on student achievement, and these are valuable presentations for the board. Probably the most important presentations we've had all year.
Welcome. Thank
For
you
sure.
for the compliment.
For sure.
Anything else from anyone? Righty,
We're not done yet.
you're done with me.
Yeah, just getting started.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Walls. Cassandra.
So I asked Cassie to come do a presentation to the board to inform you guys of where we're at with respect to all of the ESSER funding that's come down from the federal level through the state and now to the district level. Again, I think you'll find this highly informative.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, I think everyone has, I printed off a copy of the PowerPoint for you so you can follow along because some of these have a lot of verbiage on them. But basically, I'm going to discuss all of the 3 rounds of ESSER funding and then any other related funds that we've received a part of COVID. So the first round of ESSER funding that we received was signed into law on March 27th, and that was the CARES Act. Thank you. we received $730,454. The second round of funding is ESSER 2, and that does stand for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. Also, it's instead of CARES, it's CRSA, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. That was signed into law December 27th, 2020. The amount that Elko County School District received was $2,888,698. Our application for that grant was just recently approved in the last week. So we're actually able to enter our budgets, and I'll go into more detail then. The last.
We haven't received that money yet, or we have?
So all the grants are on a reimbursement process. And just to know, all COVID money within these acts that were signed into law, we are able to reimburse our general fund going back to March 30th or March 13th, 2020. The last round of funding that was just approved within this administration is the ARP, or the American Rescue Plan. Elko County School District is receiving about $6.4 million. That was signed into law March 11th. The application just opened up last week. We have not received the funding yet. We have received the allocation, but we have not yet received approval because we have not submitted our application. I have an asterisk there. The Nevada Department of Ed, they have to go through the US Department of Ed and also apply for the funding. So they've only received 2/3 of their allocation, into which they only give the school districts 2/3 of our allocation. So our total allocation is going to be $6.4 million. But as of right now, when I'm filling out the grant application, I'm only able to apply for $4.2 million. Once that's approved, then, and once their application's approved, then the additional allocation will come into ePage and we can apply for it. So just some key reminders with the ESSER funds. They must be spent on activities relating to preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID. Underneath the law, funds can be used for any activity authorized by the Elementary Secondary Education Act, the IDEA Act, Adult Ed, Family Literacy Act, Perkins, McKinney-Vento, in addition to other activities with the response. But just to be clear with that, even though something may apply under the ESEA Act, it's still our application, whatever we're requesting, needs to go back to a COVID-related activities. So I know that we've discussed in the past capital projects with this. Unless it's a response to COVID, it's not allowable. Let's see, ESSER 1, 2, and 3 funds, they can all be spent on the same allowable activities. But in the third round of funding, we do have a mandatory requirement that we have to spend greater than 20% or equal to that for learning loss, just learning loss. So summer school, extended learning, any activities in that realm. These funds are federal funds, and thus they're governed by the Uniform Grant Guidance and the EDGAR. So basically with all federal funds, when we sign our assurances, we agree to proper accounting policy, that we are submitting our reimbursements monthly, that we're following the allowabilities of the grant. And mainly it's all accounting principles as well. So procurement. And lastly, this is obvious, but these funds are temporary and not ongoing. So the US Department of Education has instilled some planning considerations. So we should be thinking in mind when we're creating these narratives and these budgets that we should be spending the funding on interventions and strategies. So as with this grant, as with any of our grants, they have to be evidence-based. As we mentioned before, there's ESSA evidence-based, which goes off of statistical white papers, basically showing if the levels are promising, strong evidence. As with any funding that we request, we have to go off of that. The funding that we're requesting, it has to be sustainable. So for anything that I'm requesting, I have to be able to prove to the state and the Department of Ed that we're not going to start a project and then at the end of the funding, it's just going to stop. We have to sustain anything that we're doing. We need to determine the needs of the LEAs and the schools and student families. So we have to be transparent with all of this funding and collect feedback and stakeholder input. We have to keep equity at the forefront of all decision-making. And then the US Department of Education provides guidance, like I said, that this can be retroactive back to March 30th, 2020. So we'll go start with the ESSER 1, the CARES Act. Congress set aside approximately $13.2 billion of the $30.75 billion to K through 12 or through the SESA funds. And then Nevada received 113 million of that. And of that, the LEAs will receive a minimum distribution of 105 million. So the Nevada Department of Education is allowed to keep 10% of the allocation from the US Department of Ed. They can use it for administration expenses. The Nevada Department of Education has been using it for admin, but mainly they have also taken that additional money and allocated it out for competitive grants. So the districts can apply for additional money as well. So of that first round, Elko County School District receives 730,000. With this first round, 4,000 was allocated to the Spring Creek Christian Academy. Within that bill, there was a CARES Act equitable service. This was later void for ESSER 2 and 3. So we did have to allocate that money and work with the Spring Creek Christian Academy and make sure that they were able to receive the services that they needed. We do this annually with them anyways, because they're a private school. They decided they still have the funding available for them. They still are unsure if they want to use it, but it is there for them. So ESSER funds are awarded to the SEAs, and that's the state educational agencies in the same proportion that receive our Title I allocations. And that's going, I'm probably going to skip that through the remaining slides, but for ESSER 1, 2, and 3, it's all based on Title I allocations. So with our CARES budget that we use, we hired an additional transportation custodian for 2 years because we needed help with the buses, with cleaning, sanitation. We provided distance learning PD to support our staff when we were going online. We extended our contract and added additional seats through Communities and Schools in the University of Nevada, Las Vegas for 2 years for telehealth to provide mental services for our students. In this, we had to respond quickly and get PPE. And as you all know, with the economy, this took up a big portion because there was a high demand and prices were increasing. So we had to get gloves, hand sanitizer, masks, etc. We purchased air purifiers, Clorox 360 sprayers, Wi-Fi hotspots for 1,500 students. And then we purchased 500 Chromebooks to aid in our one-to-one ratio to make sure that students had a Chromebook to take home. The next round of funding is the ESSER 2 or CRSA, the Corona Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, which was signed December 27, 2020. This provided an additional $54.3 billion to the Emergency Relief Fund. And then, like I said, ESSER funds were awarded based on Title I allocations. Nevada districts received over $429 million. Of that, 0.67% went to Elko County School District. We received $2,888,698. The deadline to spend this funding is September 30th, 2023. If you look at the actual bill itself, it'll say September 30th, 2022, but with the additional Tidings Act, we have an additional 12 months to spend the funds. With all of this funding, it's going to be highly monitored. We're going to be audited. So those details are forthcoming. Like I said, everything that we put in there has to be evidence-based. We have to demonstrate outcomes. But we have yet to see actually within the monitoring what that's going to look like. They're still developing that. So with the ESSER 2 requirements, we needed a needs assessment. That was a part of the application. That was when Michelle was still on board. One thing that we knew the ESSER 3 funds were coming. And with both of those grants, we needed a needs assessment. We needed to demonstrate that we've had stakeholder feedback, talked with our teachers. So that was when we created the focus groups at each school site. And I believe that some of you were included in those focus groups. We invited community members, staff, PTA. We took those results as well as from the surveys that we've sent out multiple times throughout the year and created the needs assessment. We use the needs assessment, but another requirement we could have used was a strategic plan. Our performance, we can go off our strategic plans, our SPPs, we could have used that as well, but we used our needs assessment. So based on the focus group results, an overwhelming percentage of participants felt that addressing the mental health of not only students, but staff was extremely important. Other priorities included academic growth, student relations, access to technology, at-risk student groups, course failure rates, communication from central office, adult relationships, and students with special learning needs or IEPs. I would say morale. Priorities. So based on the survey results, focus groups, Elko identified 5 priorities. There was 10 priorities within the grant application for ESSER 2, where we had to align our needs assessment. Based on the results of our needs assessment, we aligned our top needs to address learning loss, providing social, emotional, mental health service, provide summer learning, supplemental after-school programming, including online learning, conducting other activities necessary to maintain the operation of the district and employ existing staff, additional instructional hours, and then administrative expenses, which represent an increase over previously budgeted amounts that are necessary, reasonable, and allowable. So with our ESSER 2 funds, we paid back the general fund for any overtime for our contact tracers and custodians. We also use that money to pay back the general fund for any COVID supplies that schools needed. We created an account, well, a few account numbers with a general project number. So we were able to track any of expenses. And then we used this funding to reimburse that. We used it to have signing bonuses for the upcoming year. Obviously, we need to provide incentives for new teachers since we've lost so many. Within our tribal consultation that we annually do, we're providing a WIHE with a social worker. We were able to get a director of school improvement. As we discussed in the past meetings, we've had multiple health insurance claims for our employees that were COVID related. We were able to use this funding to reimburse the general fund for that. Then we reimbursed it for Edgenuity overcharges. This was able to pay a portion of that. Obviously, our Edgenuity, we needed multiple more seats this year since more students were online in the Nevada Virtual Academy. So this helped, so we didn't have to negatively impact the general fund. We also had a negative balance in our food service account due to lost revenue since all students were able to eat for free. We did not have that additional revenue coming in, but we were still providing the services. So we're filling the general fund in that as well. The last ESSER funding is the ESSER 3, their American Rescue Plan Act, and that was enacted into law March 11th, 2021. It provides a total of nearly $123 billion to K through 12 to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operations of schools and direct the coronavirus and pandemic impact on students. Nevada received $1,071 million in ESSER funding. Of that, the LEAs will receive a minimum distribution of $964 million. An additional $3 billion reserved in the ARP Act is going to special education grants. We've just been notified that we are receiving $339,000, which we have not yet allocated or applied for. It will follow the same guidance as our local plan, our IDA, and special education early childhood grants. And then with our ESSER 3 funding, we received $6.4 million that we need to apply for. But like I said before, we're only able to apply for 2/3 of that amount right now. And then these are allocated based on Title I proportions. The period about availability, it'll go through September 30th, 2023, excluding the Tidings Act. So we actually get September 30th, 2024 to spend the funds. So with the funding, we do have to follow certain priorities, and then there's certain uses of funds. So I'll go through those. Like I said before, we have to reserve at least 20% for learning loss, after school, summer school, extended day learning, targeted to subgroups or students experiencing homelessness and children and youth in foster care. Coordination and preparedness and response efforts of local education agencies with state, local, tribal, and territorial public health departments, just to improve coordinated responses, to prevent, prepare, and respond to the coronavirus. Activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth, including how outreach and service delivery will be met for the needs of each population. Planning for and coordinating and implementing activities during long-term closure, including providing meals for eligible students, providing technology, providing requirements under the IDEA Act, and ensuring other educational services can be continued to be provided consistently with federal, state, and local requirements. Providing mental health services through the implementation of evidence-based, addressing learning loss among students, developing strategies and implementing public health protocols, including to the greatest extent practical policies in line with guidance from the CDC for the reopening and operation of school facilities. And then they did add within the ARP Act, the last one is other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services. So that allowed all districts a little bit more flexibility and umbrella to cover what we need. So like I said, we have not yet applied for the ARP grant. We have not received those funds. Our tentative budget is currently being developed. A portion of that we have allocated to be used to cover the summer school because all schools had summer school with multiple people working this year. So we're paying for those salaries. The application is due in September. We're continuing to seek public input from the community and stakeholders. And then, like I said, we have the 20% minimum learning loss requirement on that. Additional COVID money that we received the coronavirus relief funding for school districts and charter schools, $746,000. And this was used to help pay for Edgenuity. It may look like this is a lot of money, but at the end of it, Edgenuity, it was close to $2 million. So this barely covered the check. Then we also received cohort 2, the coronavirus relief funding for school districts. And the purpose of this was to reimburse districts for any allowable expenses. Though we were trying to get a 1-to-1 ratio with our Chromebooks, many of the students had older Chromebooks. And so we didn't impact the general fund. We used this $199,000 to purchase Chromebooks. So we had to spend over $1 million every year to continue the 1-to-1 ratio within Chromebooks. The additional COVID funding also continues into the Gear 1. This comes off of the CARES Act. And in the CARES Act, they set aside a portion of money for the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. We received $178,000, and the funds had to be used to purchase additional devices and connectivity based on educational programs or implement educational based programs in mathematics, reading, or addressing the mental health needs of our students. So we used this funding in spring when students came back to school to provide interventionists at the schools to work one-on-one or in small groups with the students for the spring semester to try to get them back on track. We're using the funding to purchase new curriculum for our counseling departments. And then there was a small amount left, so we used that to purchase 3 additional months of hotspots for our students. The county was also generous enough to allocate a portion of their CARES funding. They gave us $250,000 to help with the reopening of schools. We use this funding to provide 2 contact tracers. Our nurses were very busy and overwhelmed this last year, so we need additional help. We also were able to get a van for our outlying areas so we could go and disinfect the schools. We needed to purchase foggers and vital oxide. We were going through those at an extreme rate and they were expensive. With this, we also used it for the air purifiers. We received a grant from the Pennington Foundation for $500,000, but that wasn't enough to get air purifiers for all of the high need areas within our schools. So we used a portion of this funding to help supplement that. We also needed plexiglass for certain areas within our schools where teachers had to be in constant contact with students. And that's it. Any questions?
Right.
Yeah, on page 5, it talks about the allocations to Spring Creek Christian.
Mhm.
Is that the same, is it similar services that we would offer anyway?
So when I fill out the Title I applications, I have to have a consultation with any federal funding. We consult with them. And then usually they are not eligible for services because they don't have Title I students there or title students that meet those requirements, nor do they have migrant students or EL students. I meet with Joan every year. If she has those students, then we allocate a portion based on our per pupil allocation to those students. With the CARES Act funding, Betsy DeVos automatically put that in there that those schools would receive that funding and not include it based off the Title I allocation. Multiple districts were upset about that, like the larger districts. Obviously, those schools would be getting a large amount of money, which they normally wouldn't receive, and then the public school students would be missing out on that. They later voided that, and then they told us that we could go back and use that money. Obviously, we're a small community, and we just gifted them that money and said, you're still able to use it. It's still available for you.
So only if students are identified there, then special services would be allowed to.
Yeah, so I go through
service
the
those
list of
students.
students, and if they're in a Title I school area, but they go to the Christian Academy, then they're eligible for services. If they're identified as EL, then they follow under the Title III grants, then they're eligible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see, the other one I had on ESSER, on page 11, ESSER 2, then the signing bonuses. I know there's a lot of consternation about this particular one. This may not continue then based on these funds. So it's not necessarily going to be carried over to next year or the year after.
Yeah, one time.
Let's see here. On page 13, the summer school program, has that started yet? Are those funds being
Yes.
used then for?
So like I said, it's a reimbursement. I've already applied for it. I was working with a legal team actually out of DC that works with LEAs and districts because Nevada Department of Ed was audited within the last couple of years. The grant process has changed extremely. So whatever I knew that I was going to be requesting, I received on letterhead that it was going to be approved. So that way I knew that we can go out and hire these positions and provide, the schools with as many certified staff or parapros that they needed. So we did create the accounts for that, and we've been paying them and charging them. So now that I have the funds, once I enter the budget, then I'll request a reimbursement from NDE, and then that funds, those will get moved. Well, it'll still be in that account basically. So the funds will reimburse that account.
And so that's a fluid situation. We don't necessarily know which students are coming back, or because I would assume it's a voluntary program. Then you may have teachers doing it or not doing it.
So the directors created lists and got input for all the staff, and it also just helped me payroll wise. So we had a list of staff that were automatically going to be doing it, and we had contracts with them, so they agreed to the dates of the programming.
Gotcha. Okay. On page 15 of that for ESSER 3, is there going to be a way to address Title III aspects for ELLs with that particular money?
We've talked about within that creating a position. As you know, we don't have Barb Hastings anymore. So we've talked about having an EL coordinator, at-risk population coordinator for the district to take up those additional duties.
Because typically the state or federal government doesn't cover that, unfortunately. So this is great. And then my last one is page 18. I just wanted to make a comment. It was good to hear that there were one-on-one interventions. I was just at a conference last week where a student group was saying that was probably one of the most beneficial things that they had, were the one-on-one interactions with adults, just finding out how they're doing and how they're progressing. So I'm hoping that, this will continue this upcoming school year then for those students.
Yeah, and we really saw that with our Read by Grade 3 program. Last year, we didn't receive that grant, but as you know, with the per pupil funding allocation, all of that was implemented with the one the one allocation that we'll get. So even though it's still allowable within our budget has been decreased significantly. So it's limited. So this is helping out.
Great. Thanks.
Anything else?
Yeah, I got an email from the executive director from NASB, and she said that the Nevada Department of Ed has taken public comment on how to spend this money until August 9th.
Yes, and we are too. It's on our website. The Nevada Department of Ed received their funding, their allocation. Like I said, they had to apply for it first. But within the SR 3, you have to have a consultation. We were able to use the focus groups as a portion, and then we've taken public input from these meetings. And then we also have a link online right now to get public input. But the Nevada Department of Ed had to create their state plan first, in which they were using the input from the public to create that.
Okay, because in the email, it lists all those numbers you just,
Mhm.
how much money we're getting.
Yeah. If you go and look at like Humboldt, Clark, Washoe, everyone right now is seeking input on how to spend this money.
And Eureka County didn't get any.
No, because they don't accept Title I funding, so they're not eligible to receive this.
Any other questions?
Just thank you.
Thank you very much
No
for
problem. It's been a crazy year.
for walking us through that. You know, I know everybody has questions. Well, where's this? When is it? All that. So
Mhm.
thank you very much.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Yes.
like to request a 5-minute recess.
Second.
All right. It's been moved by Candace, seconded by Teresa to take a 5-minute recess for restroom break here.
For anything, stand
Anyway,
up.
okay, we'll be back at
16
in
after.
5 minutes.
We could skip
Sending it out via
3.03.
email.
All the parents would know
Great.
now
And I have pictures.
because they want to talk about the reopening plan.
Yeah.
Tuesday, so they still have parents.
There's,
Agenda was already approved at the beginning.
yeah.
If we just.
The city council.
Yeah, Steve.
I mean, you're still gonna cover it, just sorry.
That's against
It's
open meeting
not gonna
laws.
be,
How does the city council do it?
That's a good question. Time for a lawsuit.
don't know.
I'm
Um,
down 6 employees.
Looking back
I'm not
through.
still excited. I wish I was.
In the future.
If I-
It's a fire one and it's just.
Right, and I wasn't sure with where we're at with
I hired him
the different
4 weeks ago.
plans, looking at that.
Rather be down 6
Um,
and still fired, that's how good he is.
Anyway, we definitely notice and watch in future meetings to get that. See,
Next week, this week, whenever, when's our last? When are they?
I just attended another one of those open meeting law presentations. They're pretty interesting.
That's probably a good reason.
Did that with
I'll reach out to
Mission
you.
on Professional Standards.
Yeah, this
For a
week's
time
probably
to
more
work.
work. Yeah, next week might work.
I'll reach out. for you. So let's get you and I, get Julie involved because our CFO is now sort of in charge of food service.
I want to get the communication person. Because I think it has a lot to do with talking to parents. You can talk.
Gotta make sure I get it done.
That is not.
The consent agenda? No, it's public. It's, I can log out. No, I had several, after our conversation, I had several conversations with different people.
Yeah.
anyways, so. Yeah, I'm not.
Oh, really? Okay. Cool.
It is not. Executive.
Did you get it moved up?
Pardon?
Did you get it moved up?
No, he said that we can't move it up. The agenda was ordered.
I don't know. Maybe you should sue him. We should.
Sorry, from Wells.
Right, I understand.
We went. And that's what
Don't want to get in my line of paper here. Everything. My son's file by pile.
Well, that's 5 minutes, Jim. Let's go. Oh, never mind. Luke isn't back yet.
Luke wasn't here when we started. Where's he at? Where's he at?
There's this tracker. This is tracker.
Yeah, it's got him on the GPS.
After 5 minutes, I say we start.
Yep, all right.
Start without me.
Call the meeting back to order. Moving on to the next item, 2.01, Superintendent's Report. This is a non-action item.
So I
Mr.
just cover a
Smith.
few things. I think Mr. Cooney's been forwarding a weekly update that I've been providing him to the rest of the board. A couple of updates to it. As the board knows, we got shortages everywhere. We've had difficulty for a lot of years with bus drivers, for example. Through some of this ESSER funding, we were also able to establish a signing bonus program for new bus drivers. So we advertised for 11 new drivers. I talked to Seth, he's on vacation, but exchanged an email, good interest, good success. So that's a positive. Sort of in line with that, with spending some of this money is required for after school kinds of things. So I met with Rusty Barr a couple of days ago with the Boys and Girls Club, and we're trying to work out a way to do some transportation of kids from schools, from the Boys and Girls Club in the morning to schools when they start school, and then facilitate the same kind of thing in Spring Creek from Liberty and Sage to Spring Creek Elementary in the PM. And that'll fit in line with the provisions of this grant. Also, we've extended an offer to a teacher at the Montello School. I fully expect that person to accept the offer of employment, and so Montello will be a green light. They already introduced themselves, but I wanted to again point out the addition of CJ. He doesn't like going by Clayton, but that's his name. CJ Anderson is up here. Started July 1st, did an outstanding presentation for you tonight, and we're happy to have him up here. Also Candace Turnahue, who you met in our discussion on the textbook stuff. Candace has been a longtime administrator in the district. Her area is elementary ed. And again, we're happy to have her up here. Mr. Walls has transitioned once again. He's the jack of all trades. And Mr. Walls is now working over in the area of secondary education. We have a lot of additions to our administrative staff across the district. Ken Higbee has been appointed principal of Wells Combined School. Bobby Woolsey will begin work there as a dean in support of Dr. Higbee. Sean Stanton has moved from Spring Creek High School and is now the principal at Grammar number 2. Paul McEnany moved from, initially was the principal at Spring Creek L, requested a transfer to be the principal at Battleborn. That transfer was approved. It's problematic because they unfortunately only have a few kids there to start out. We couldn't justify a full FTE administrator for 15 kids or 17 or wherever they sort of are at. So Mr. McEnany moved to Spring Creek High School. He is now the principal there. Sally McDermott, this happened a little bit earlier in the spring, but Sally is the new principal at Spring Creek Middle School. Michelle LaRock was a vice principal at Liberty Peak, interviewed and was selected as the principal over at Spring Creek Elementary. Mr. Lobato applied for and was granted a transfer to a vice principal position at Elko High School. Jessica Harris, who was the VP at Flagview, applied for and was selected as the principal to replace him at Sage. With the departure of Mr. Stanton to Grammar number 2, vice principal position was advertised and interviewed for. A large number of applicants, and Wade Pearson was selected as the vice principal at Spring Creek High School. Spring Creek Middle School, with the loss of Mr. Reddig back to Reno, that cleared a spot for a vice principal at the middle school. Again, we did pool interviews actually, but at any rate, Christian Gordon was selected as the vice principal at Spring Creek Middle School. Lacey Smith, who had been a vice principal at Adobe Middle School, graciously pitched in and functioned up here at central office as the principal of NNVA during our virtual studies, if you will. And she has been transferred back to Adobe. That may be temporary. It may not be. It depends on what the need is when we open up. We don't know for sure what the ultimate enrollment will be in our virtual system, but it's mandated by the state that we provide choice to parents. So let's see. If there's anything else. Oh, with respect to Battleborn, one thing I did not know is that the students there are allowed to come and go at their will. So you're never sure that any kind of enrollment there is permanent. We have
Not on a daily basis, though.
not, well, I'm not sure about that.
I can just hang out in Elko and come on back.
Well, no.
Okay,
I can unenroll from
Right.
Battleborn
Gotcha.
at my will. So, we have a significant allocation of staffing over at Battleborn. And that was predicated on an anticipated enrollment of over 100 students over there. And that did not come to fruition. I know they're busily recruiting and doing everything that they can to acquire students, but it nevertheless leaves 9 or 10 employees over there with 15 kids. And so our intent, should that continue to go south, is those employees would be taken care of, and we would make every effort possible to return them to their original spots. In the interim, I've assigned administrative duties to the administrative team at Carlin Combined Schools. So that's T.W. Cunningham and Jesse Sabo. They will receive a slight increase in responsibility for doing that. At such time that there's 100+ kids at that school, we will reappropriate a full FTE for administration at the school. Unless you have any other questions, the rest of what I have was in the update that I sent Mr. Cooney on Friday.
Any questions from the board?
Did all the teachers at Battleborn come from here?
Yes.
From in the district?
Yeah, even one came from Wendover.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So.
Can we reallocate them?
Well, right now we've got to do something because it's a secondary school. It's all content based. And so those people have to be licensed to issue credit in science, in math, in English, in social studies. So it's not possible to sort of spread the wealth to 1 or 2 teachers because they're not licensed to issue credit to students at the high school level. We'll continue to monitor and hope that they find kids.
Okay.
Anyway, that's where it's at.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 3.01, designation of special education and school counselors as areas of critical need under NRS 286, 520 through 525. This is a possible action item. Mr. Smith.
What those inclusive statutes describe is a process by which districts can address shortages. What it does is once a board designates a certain area as a critical need shortage area, we would be allowed to go out and recruit retired teachers that are certified in those areas. Not saying it would or would not be successful. It just allows us to do that. If we're successful, that person receives a regular salary through the school district and their PERS is not interrupted. The district does not pay PERS on that employee, only salary. So think of it this way, it's a regular employee less 30% because that's what we allocate towards PERS. So
we already did that. I thought we already.
No, that was with regards to
that was
the
emergency.
90-day, the
That was
90-day
waiving
PERS.
PERS has a requirement that when a person retires, they are not allowed to work in a PERS participating agency for a period of 90 days. If they do, it disrupts their PERS and causes them basically to have it pulled. So the first thing that we did was ask for relief for that, to get a waiver on that 90-day period so that our teachers that retired in May can come back to work in August as substitute teachers to address our sub shortage. This is a different thing than that, an additional thing.
The district hasn't used it very often.
We've not used it in, my guess would be 15 years. But at any rate, we've been struggling, for example, in the area of school counseling for, I can't tell you how many years. Turnover is at 43% just in the last year. And unfortunately, there are no school counselors. There just aren't. Doesn't matter who you talk to, they don't exist. Turnover in the area of special education is about 23.5% this year. And again, those people don't exist. And so it's not that you guys can't designate at some future time additional areas, but those are the two most critical areas that need addressed now.
And is there a length cap? Can we hire them for 6 months, 2 years, a year?
The length is a 2-year period of time. At such time, you have to go and reapply and demonstrate that it is still an area of critical need. So anybody that got hired as a school counselor this fall would be good for 21, 22, 22, 23. And then we would, you guys would have to come back and redesignate school counseling as critical need. We'd have to refill out the application and see if it's approved.
Okay.
That's how that works.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, moved by Luke, seconded by Ira to approve the designation of special ed and school counselors as areas of critical need under NRS 286, 520 through 525. Is there any discussion?
Just one question. So the PERS contribution is the only benefit that's gone then from the benefits package. Otherwise they can.
Yeah, they're covered in all other areas, health insurance, all that kind of stuff. They just don't, it saves the district. We don't have to contribute to PERS because the individual is already drawing PERS.
Right. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the designation is approved. Moving on to item 3.02, request permission to go out to bid for the natural gas conversion project for Sage Elementary, Spring Creek Middle School, and Spring Creek High School for possible action. Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, everybody knows Southwest Gas is running natural gas over the Spring Creek area, and there will be a triplex of Sage. Late August, early September, propane to natural gas.
So I had a couple of questions, Mr. Kelly. So would that pay-as-you-go money be used for this then? So is there another project that's gonna be kicked off the list?
Not at this time, it'll be kicked off in November. It'll pass.
Okay, and is this a cost savings or not? Because when I looked up, the price of natural gas versus propane, natural gas was pretty high.
40%. So it should have less than a 2-year payback period.
It's just a comment. Personally, they had brought natural gas into the subdivision where I live, and Comparative from a year ago to this year, the bill in the middle of the winter was 40% of what the propane bill was. So at 40%, there's considerable savings, especially if you take a look and ours was with a smaller tank, propane tank, with that huge tank that's there in the Spring Creek area. There's going to be a significant amount of savings.
Our expenditure on propane in those 3 schools is massive, correct?
Correct. Yeah. We'll be able to sell those tanks, and that's gonna offset that $400,000 by quite a bit. We'll probably get 50,000 a tank.
Okay,
I move to approve.
I second.
okay, moved by Teresa, seconded by Robert. Oh, Luke. Okay, any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Take that out to bid and let's get this taken care of. All right, item 3.03, review of plans for safe return for the 21-22 school year for possible action.
So.
Mr. Smith.
Complicated issue, no doubt. I've been participating with other district superintendents across the state of Nevada. Everyone is faced with identical issues. What I can tell you is I've provided the letter from our board that was sent to the governor to all 17 superintendents. They're aware of where our board stands with regard to what they desire. I can also tell you that we're not the only county that, or local government for that matter, that is engaged in similar types of requests for local control and choice. Having said that, I don't have any knowledge that we've received a response on the board's request. And so that's sort of where we're at. Complicating all of this, I know that Carson City's on their 7th rendition of their return to school plan. And the reason for that is because guidance changes on a daily, hourly, I wish it was monthly basis, but it changes that quickly. And so whatever plan is developed today will be affected by some other guidance that you receive tomorrow. So that's why it's a complex issue. It's a moving target. We don't know what to expect from one day to the next, whether you're talking about CDC or guidance from our state. So difficult problem, but everybody's facing it. And I guess it's up to you guys as the board to figure out how you want to navigate it.
So as far as I'm concerned, as far as I understand, so this document was sent in because we needed to submit something.
This was sent in mid-July. We didn't have a board meeting. The only purpose for sending it in was to comply and qualify for grants. There's an addendum on it that simply made a reference to the request that the board has made to the governor for local control and for choice. And like I said, you could define whatever plan you chose to tonight based on whatever guidance currently exists as of tonight. And that plan may not be in compliance by the end of this week with whatever the new guidance is. And that's why districts like Carson City are on their 7th rendition of a plan. I don't know what the answer to that is.
So what, going to the Carson City deal, what did they do to get that approved that we should be doing for choices for parents?
You know, I don't know the details of their plan or, you know, what they have going. I just came across an email feed where it was apparent that they had completed their 7th rendition of their reopening plan. Now, I don't know what iterations those plans went through or what they specifically did there to arrive at wherever they're at now.
So if we tackle the issue, we'll just do one issue at a time. Full in person, no distance as of right now is okay.
Yes.
So we could put that in the plan, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Vaccination passport or questioning, we've gone through the NRS as a school district stands right now. COVID vaccine falls under all the other vaccines. So if you don't want to get vaccinated, it's up to you. Staff and students will not be questioned if they have the vaccine or not.
The district, to reiterate, the district has no function, no articulation, no association with COVID-19 vaccines, whether that's students, employees, or anyone else.
So those are the first two. So the third one, the biggest, the elephant in the room right now is the mask.
Okay.
From what I can see, if you look at all three major issues, and then the sports obviously and everything else falls under, but the third one where we really have an up in the air question right now is masks.
I don't disagree.
But I think the addendum addresses that, right? It's no mass, like our letter says, until there's a
Here,
directive.
if you look at the plan, it's like,
and then we're out of compliance.
And, you know, I haven't seen the directive. Another correspondence came across, and I believe people brought it up tonight. I believe that there is a directive that will come out of the state Friday that has some sort of requirement relating to masks. I haven't read it, so I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to speculate on what the language is or what it says. But that's apparently going to come down the pipe.
Well, ultimately, to break down even hard on the masks, it would be literally kids under 12, correct? Because those are the only ones who are not vaccinated.
Again, I don't know what the directive says, so I can't comment on, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's on purpose. I'm sure that he does it the Friday after everybody has their board meetings.
It usually happens when we're right in the middle of our meeting, but
So I guess the question for us is, as we stood last time, giving the parents the choice, because at this point, we're not going to question the child anyway, and we're not going to, as you pointed out, the district has distanced itself from all vaccination issues.
And speaking of that too, Luke, I had requested last time, is there a way to have a waiver of that? Is that legally possible in this situation?
Well, what we would need to do is request that question to be explored by legal counsel, which would not be a subject for this, but
conversation.
that is a conversation that the board would like to explore with legal counsel. I can facilitate that.
Yeah.
But I would say as of right now, the plan should be like those three items as of right now, just open the schools.
Yep.
And maybe have a litigation or a layered issue to show that we're responsible, if you will, not that we agree or disagree, but saying that if the cases, if it explodes supposedly, because we're on the 7th wave by now, we can revert and individualize each school like you guys did last year. I think that would be the best option for us, because I mean, honestly, if we're going to push vaccines and push masks, we're going to have teachers and no students.
So my suggestion would be this: await whatever appears to be coming, allow myself and board president, board clerk to explore whatever that language says with legal counsel and find out what wiggle room exists and what can and cannot be done, and go from there. We still have ample time to explore that question and bring the plan back to the board 2 more times before school opens up.
That doesn't give parents a lot of time to
I
come up with
under-
alternatives.
I understand that, but what we're seeking is the best, the best answer, the best thing that we can do for the parents, students, teachers, and community.
Simply give the choice to the parents, that's it. I mean, it's not a hard thing to do.
No, and we need to, I think that we need to get some direction and some questions answered with regards to how the Carson City Board did their action. And,
To the Carson City Board.
I have.
Well, my concern
So-
is he hasn't replied in what, 4 weeks, 5 weeks?
That's why we asked
So
for
that's
the
pretty
5
much a
days.
stance.
He's not gonna,
If
he's
you
not
don't
gonna
respond in
respond.
Well,
5 days, we
I've-
take your non-response out.
I've got the receipt that the governor's office has received that. It's, I believe that with what Mr. Smith was saying right there, that this document is going to be a living document. It's going to be moving and it's going to be possibly amended a number of times as the situation makes itself clear here. One thing that I noticed looking at the original document that was submitted a year ago before school started, it had a stakeholder committee that had taken a look at it. And there was a board member on that particular committee, and that board member unfortunately passed away. But I think that we need some input with regards to these amendments even. So if we could put together a committee to take in the comments, just like what we're hearing on our public comments during the meeting, the item that Misty just said with regards to parent choice and that sort of thing. I think that we need to get something rolling and clean up the language specifically. I know that the difference in the documents from the original one and the newer one right here, that gives us a good place to come from. And as you said, we have 2 more meetings before school starts, so we can pretty much nail this down. So everybody knows, the kids know, the parents know, staff knows what the expectation is going to be. If there's a possibility of a liability waiver, all of those things, we need to explore that and move
I'd also,
forward.
maybe when we talk to legal is what protections do we have with the county doing what they did to protect us? as a
We can
district?
explore all of those.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm gonna just say it, I'm probably speaking out of turn, but we've given the governor enough and we've asked, and we haven't got a response. When are we gonna, I get, we need to protect the school district because it's our business, right? But we also got to protect our kids.
The one thing that I think that we have going for us that is that we didn't have even a year ago as we moved into this. I think we have the cooperation of all 17 school districts, or at least 15 of the 17, to qualify that statement, to work together and to put pressure towards the governor's office.
Well, and by putting pressure, we pretty much know what he's going to come back and say on Friday. The CDC just said, basically, even if you're vaccinated, you still need a mask. So we pretty much know where he's going. So I'm not saying it's not to do masks. I'm saying, like the parents are saying, we don't need a committee per se, because we know what basically everybody wants. They want freedom of choice.
Yeah.
So.
But we should have expert individuals.
We should
on
have
that committee that, especially our health
I know,
professionals.
and that's where I'm saying we could have Dr. Putnam, who is the relay, put some layers in there so that this is what happens if this is the case, this is what happens if this is the case, so that we have something to fall back on.
Does the board have suggestions for who you would like to have on the committee?
I would love to be on the committee.
We should probably have a county commissioner. We should have Dr. Putnam and 1 or 2 board members and then parents,
Teachers,
teachers, so that we know.
Yeah,
our nurses,
yeah, the school nurses.
similar composition.
We had the acting,
We
the,
need as much input as we can from everybody.
yep,
And that way, if we have a county commissioner on there.
And
he
not
can
just
tell us.
Elko City.
No, the
From
whole
all around
district,
the,
yeah.
our smaller.
So I've
communities.
got representative from county commission, nurse, 2 board members, 2 or more teachers, 2 or more administrators. Do you want to try to get a city councilman on there as well?
I think the city would be well.
One of the
We had
cities-
Nevada Gold Mines, a representative from Nevada Gold Mines was there.
With the school?
What does Nevada School Gold Mines have to do with it?
This is for the
They're
addendum, if they understand.
Yeah, this is going off of the original plan that was a year
I
ago.
have a
So,
suggestion.
Okay.
Candace?
You know, that document was created last year when circumstances were completely different than they are today. My suggestion would be that we leave that one in the past and move forward with a new reopening document. Because obviously we no longer have the issues with social distancing. The students are back full-time.
PCR testing is not a thing.
And yeah, and you know, so I think we need to just start new. And Carson City I do have their plan, and I did talk to one of the board members from Carson City. It has to be tweaked, obviously, to fit Elko County. But I think it's a good starting place. It's short, sweet, and to the point. And
Perfect.
and right, and they cover things like the wellness aspects, you know, and all that. And they did have input from the community in developing this, and they have passed this plan. However, it does have a caveat in the plan that talks about, you know, if there are new directives from the governor, that then they would have to comply with those directives. So that's a decision this board has to make, I think, in the end. Are we going to comply with the directives or not?
Yep, that's exactly what it's coming.
And that's what it's gonna come down to, unless,
Misty,
now we can,
please.
yeah, can I just speak, please? My suggestion would be to start with this plan. Like you said, we have a couple of meetings yet before school starts. We can come up with the plan, and then if this directive isn't rescinded by the time school begins, then we're gonna have to make that decision one way or the other.
Agreed.
Yep.
And, you know, that's what
Okay.
it's gonna come down to. But in the meantime, we can have a good, short, sweet, simple reopening plan for what our conditions are right now.
Okay, so may I work with Mr. Cooney, or do you want to delegate it to someone else to establish the committee? How do you want to do that?
We can do that.
Is that
Yeah.
okay with the
That-
board?
All right with the rest of you? Okay,
That'd be good to have, yeah. to-
Okay.
To come up with some decent verbiage in there. Because as you
Yeah,
you were
get
saying,
the-
Candace, the short and sweet, I mean, essentially this addendum is short and sweet as it is, and we just need the right verbiage in there.
Right, and this
Yeah.
actually is short and sweet, but it does have more detail
Right.
than the addendum.
Yep.
And I think it's confusing to people to have the addendum attached
to
to
the
that
old one.
document.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying I think we need
we need one document.
one new document that covers where we're at now.
Absolutely.
All right,
So we'll work starting tomorrow to establish a committee. Try to schedule a committee meeting, a first one either later this week, probably, if not early next week. And I don't know that this is a thing that's going to take 24 meetings. I think it can be done fairly quickly.
How are you gonna get parents for that committee?
So
I will
Jim,
work those details out with Mr. Cooney.
okay.
Does that work?
Want to restate?
Yeah, I mean,
that?
I don't know.
What you said you're having a
I'd like to
committee
make the
next-
motion to pursue what you just said. Like,
Second.
Okay.
Okay, so there's been a motion made by Brian. Is there a second? Seconded by Robert. All right.
Sorry,
and-
what was the motion? Mr. Zeisler? I didn't-
just what Mike had said too.
Oh, to form a
To
committee.
create
Okay.
a committee and have a meeting by the end of the week and then hopefully have limited to two. things and then- Because as we know, it's going to be a very volatile plan too, so we just need a.
Right.
base.
This, in order to get things started, we'll get going right there. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the motion passes. We'll get working on that and get some folks involved in this with the stakeholders. So, all right. Moving on, the next item, consent agenda 4.01.
Second.
All right, there's been moved by Brian, seconded by Luke. Is there any discussion?
Yes, on the administrative content, is that something that we discuss in closed session?
With the
Negotiations and
with the
contract.
contract, with the superintendent, it can be open. So is there any discussion?
I had a couple questions on the contract. Number one, I don't know what the qualifications are. Like what qualifications does this person have? I mean, I don't, this is awkward how you discuss this in our administrative content, but what are the credentials, I guess, is what I'm asking.
The credentials of the
Person in
interim
question, yeah.
superintendent?
Yeah,
Um,
Mike can answer, I guess.
no, I guess, Mike.
By credentials, Candace, you mean
Degrees.
background?
Degrees, yeah, degrees, what administrative degrees?
Yeah, so Bachelor's of Science, Geology, 1983. Bachelor's of Science in Secondary Education, 1986. Master's degree, Educational Leadership, 1988, all from the University of Wyoming. I have completed 28 years of employment, all as a school administrator. And that includes vice principal AD assignments in Wells and Carlin. 10 years as a vice principal in Spring Creek, principal in Spring Creek, director of school improvement for central office, director of personnel services, central office, assistant superintendent, central office, deputy superintendent, central office. That all adds up to 28 years when you add it together.
And how many of those were in administrative?
All,
All? So you never actually, did you actually teach in the class?
yes, I did. I did not teach in Elko County. My teaching experience is in Wyoming.
My only concern here is that the contract amount is greater than what we're offering on our superintendent application. So that's the concern that I had there.
And that was my concern. I mean, more responsibility, more pay, absolutely. I just, my concern was
Okay.
a more than above, and where was this negotiated,
Yep.
Those type of questions.
All right. All those.
I
are we ready?
had one more question. I just thought there'd be
Okay.
more discussion on that one.
Yeah.
Is it possible, I know other school districts have done this, is it possible to appoint the interim superintendent as the superintendent if the job is done satisfactorily?
That is a possibility. However, we have gone out and announced the position,
Right.
and applications have been
Right. And so if
received.
none of those applicants really shine or really meet our needs, can we appoint the interim?
I would imagine that the board has that flexibility.
Or would he, or for transparency's sake, would it be better for him to just put his name in the hat? And obviously, it would be the same outcome in that sense, but
It could work either way, I think.
you know what I mean? So they can't say,
Yeah.
well, you wasted our
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. So,
Just due process to have interviews and whatnot.
yes. Yep. Any other discussion?
I just wonder, can we discuss changing the amount of the contract, or are Robert and I the only ones who have a concern?
That's what I kind of want to part this off from the consent agenda. And I completely agree paying somebody what they're worth, but starting at the top of the pay scale is, we've done that, and it kind of shot ourselves in the foot, I think.
Okay, so, or,
And I don't think anybody's denying there should be an increase
Right,
at all whatsoever.
right.
I mean, we're
Yeah,
sort of
I-
over.
I agree with that too.
okay. The
Is there a
suggestion that Ira had was to separate off the one. So the maker of the motion, which I think it was Brian.
I'd accept the addendum.
Okay, and so we'll separate that off. We want to, the original motion was to approve the consent agenda. So it's to move to approve the consent agenda with the administrative item separated off. Does everybody know what we're voting on? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the consent agenda with that part is passed. Coming back,
Move to accept the contract.
okay, there's been a motion to accept the contract. Is there a second? Is there a second? No? Chair will second it to carry on to start the discussion. Okay? So it's been moved and seconded to open the discussion on the contract. So
Maybe to sway some people, so. I'll admit, initially, when I first saw the contract, I was same questions, like, why are we paying above and beyond? And then you take a second, you sit back and you think about it, and he is bringing a certain expertise that's specific to the district. And I kind of said it's a little awkward.
That's all right.
Sitting on the head. So I would have to agree with the contract actually now, more so than I did say yesterday, for example, because I think he can actually bring to the position, and as an interim, probably more so than most people, because he's been in the district for 28 years. He has an intricate relationship with a lot of directors and administrators, good or bad, like any kind of relationship anyway. But I believe that it's going to be short term for now. My question would be, if you do put your name in the hat and you do, out of 4 contestants, pick out, do we have to revert to this, or can we go back to what our initial bid was for the positions?
it basically would be back to just like something was started at that particular time.
No, but yeah, my question is,
Yeah,
if you have 3 people coming for the position and they know X amount is their max, and then all of a sudden we hire Mike and his is automatically higher, that's not transparent. You know what I mean? That's kind of weird as due process goes. For the interim, I have no problem with it because I do think you bring a certain set of skills that we need right now, obviously, because while we're between a rock and a hard place, regardless. Does that make sense? Does
Yeah.
that explain something?
It does. It does. Yep.
Well, I think the current salary on there is indicative of the environment that he's having to navigate too. This is not a normal year.
No.
So as interim superintendent, that dollar figure is, I mean, well worth the experience that he has, as you said.
Okay. The thing that I want to, well, I should let other board members speak first. So other comments?
I would just say again, we're in a situation where there's no room to go up. So if we approve this contract now, and then say Mike did become superintendent, there's no room to go.
Well, no, from my understanding, if he gets the real job, do the real job. If you go back down.
That's, I mean, that's where we're
You
at,
might
right?
ask him about
That doesn't make
the
sense to me,
job,
though.
what the job is entailed over the course of the.
Okay, so my suggestion is just that we hire him at the top that we advertised the position for. Okay, can I say it? Which would be 170,000. And that way you have room to move upward if that's how it pans out. And then we don't have the problem with the back and forth, and we don't have the issue with other applicants.
But usually an interim is going to make more. It's kind of like hiring
a consultant.
You're going to pay them more than if you actually had, like if you have, for example, a geologist.
No experience.
If he
I
has.
have a geologist.
If you hire him full-time as salary employee, you won't pay him less than if he's part-time consultant. Consultant, you're always going to pay more.
Right.
So that's where I kind of like say reevaluate this whole conversation in my little head.
So the position currently is for somebody that would be new to the district. I don't know the candidates, so I'm just making an assumption at this point.
150, 170.
But we have an incredibly experienced.
Right, no, trust me, I don't, I'm not disagreeing that there shouldn't be an increase. I just have a hard time swallowing going over what we're offering, a long-term.
An inexperienced person.
Well,
so to my small head too, understand this. If we hire Mike full-time, then we have to move his salary back to, because that's a tough conversation to have too.
Yeah.
No, I think that goes without saying, because then it's full-time.
I mean, not an interim superintendent,
This is really awkward.
He's going to hit me, I know.
Yeah. You don't have to get nervous right there. Well, as a chair, what I'm going to do, I've heard different points right here. Yeah, so the motion is to approve the contract. So we're going to vote on approving the contract at the 180 rate. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Chair votes aye, and I think that was a affirmative vote. All right. Very good. And
it's nothing personal. It's just, I mean,
I've been sitting through this
all
for
right.
28 years.
But
Moving on.
I was gonna say, I think it's
to-
important to note that there would be negotiations for whoever gets hired as the
Yes.
permanent superintendent.
Exactly.
Whoever that might be.
Right.
So negotiations are always part of, Mike's life forever. So he
Yep.
knows
so
that.
I'm a new board member. Is there a reason why that wasn't done in this instance?
It wasn't
was a
done in
negotiation.
that.
No, I'm saying the negotiation. That's what I'm asking. Since
We sat down and had talked and came up with the terms that you have in front of you. That was worked through. Okay, and
I
just the
wasn't aware
same,
of it.
and to follow up for everybody's information. Every time that we have had, well, the last 2 times that we've had superintendents, a new superintendent, there's been a group of 3 board members that have gone in and sat down
2 to
and
3. It's not necessarily 3, sometimes 2,
to,
sometimes 3.
yeah,
But it
Can't
can't
have-
be,
we
it
can't
can't
have
be
a
a quorum.
yeah, no more than 3 that sit down and work through the details of the contract, and then it's brought back to the board for ratification. Okay, so that process is there. That's the way in which we move through it.
And really the discussion is the negotiations.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Anything that has to do with the hiring of the superintendent, and that is subject to the open meeting law, and there is no closed sessions with regards to the superintendent. All other employees fall under that, under the guise and the guidelines there. Okay. Item 5.5.01, report from our NASB director for possible action.
Just have, if you guys have got public comment on how the Department of Ed should spend their ESSER 3 money. Deadline's August 9th.
Okay. August 9th.
Comment. And there's a whole list of ways they want to spend it. It's stuck in the middle of a big email. If I get somebody to help me, I can sort that out and send it to you guys.
Speaking of big emails, I don't, do you have more? I was just gonna ask a question about
Go ahead.
the trainings that we've had that Deb put in her last email. I mean, they were down below or somewhere.
Got canceled.
Are they canceled now? Okay, so no trainings virtually or anything like that?
Not scheduled. She's
Okay.
rescheduling it.
Okay, and those would have been our normal state board meetings that we've had in the past then?
The training that we need as board members, yeah.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So that's still, the trainings are still online or not online. They're still scheduled for November.
Yeah, there's one in September
Okay,
in Vegas that has been canceled, and the one in November.
okay. All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Items from board members.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I
Yes,
had an
ma'am.
item. I just wanted to report, Mr. Walls and I went to the Battleborn Youth Academy this morning and got a really great tour. There are actually 22 students there right now. Obviously, it's not what they anticipated. So I really would encourage everyone to go to their Facebook page or Instagram, or they're all over social media, and share. It's an amazing program. I was really impressed. Those kids have been there 3 days, and they were already showing such amazing, thanks. And just the strides they've taken in 3 days was shocking to me. They did indicate that they thought, after evaluating the students when they came in, that they think that they will probably all stay. They can't guarantee it, but they're very hopeful because so far the students are, they're doing what they're asked to do. And like I said, it was very impressive to see. I loved the way their approach to helping these kids has a lot to do with building confidence in themselves. Lots of rewards. It's not like what you see on, in the military trainings, with a lot of yelling and screaming. That is not, that is not how the program works. So very, very impressive. I just really hope that they can help more students that I know are out there that are at risk, and that I think it would be a very beneficial program. So anything that all of us can do to help share that message would be very helpful. And their facilities, of course, are pretty amazing too. So.
Other items?
Well, just to touch base, how are we looking on the Spring Creek High School building and the revamp of the administrative offices and the new classrooms? Are we on schedule? Because that was supposed to be due beginning of August, right? Done?
Elko.
Elko.
Elko High School.
Elko High School.
Yeah.
Classroom section. Then we're on schedule on the rebound.
Okay.
I just want to say thanks to the city of Elko, the county, for supporting our letter to the governor and having our back and supporting that. I also like to see an agenda item on a future meeting about mental health, what we're doing. We've talked about that money that was coming in that we're spending on mental health, but I know 2 instances that there's 2 families that their kids are in the school district and they were affected by suicide in the last 30 days. So what are we doing to work with those families, that are affected by this? It's hitting pretty close to home. So, so it'd be good to see a presentation on mental health and what we're doing to reach these kids.
Actually, to echo Robert, right, on that specific issue, I know of a family whose child called and he was placed on hold for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So do we have something that we could try to implement in the school district to try to help these children so that we're not just the 800 suicide number, but some counselor or department that can actually help even the teachers and whatnot, because 45-minute wait on hold for somebody who's ready to go is too long.
Yep. No question. You have one?
Yeah.
2?
Yeah, probably 2, actually. I just wanted to,
How many do you have?
am I stepping
Go
on
ahead.
toes?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was just going to say, I wanted to commend the summer custodial staff, the groundskeepers at each of the schools. Especially with the dry weather that we've been having, that they still look wonderful. And just a special recognition for Northside Elementary. Their campus always, every summer, looks phenomenal. And I also wanted to thank the teachers who have been at Northside doing ESY for our special ed population. They've done a great job, and thank you, Ray, for putting that together. Yeah.
All right. And as part of the board comments, I want to tell all of the members of the board that as soon as the meeting is over, if you walk into Cassie's area, there will be a packet with the applications that have been received for the superintendency. So, and there will be an email that will go out and requesting the availability of when board members would be available to do interviews. As I see things, we're going to have one meeting to go through the protocols of the process, so everybody understands and we're all on the same page with regards to the process itself, and then scheduling the specific times to get interviews for the candidates that the board selects to be interviewed. So don't take off without your packet, please. Moving on, to item 6.01, approval of the accounts payable for possible action. Now, before we take a motion, there is disclaimers. So, Robert, do you want to be first one out?
Yes, I'll be abstaining from the Gallagher Ford as I'm an employee there.
Okay. So is there a motion to pay Gallagher Ford accounts payable?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of paying the Gallagher Ford, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Chair votes aye. That is approved.
All right, and I will be disclosing that I have a family member who is employed by Wells Rural Electric, so I will be abstaining from those accounts payable.
Okay,
Move to approve those.
all right. All those in favor of paying the Wells Rural Electric, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Chair votes aye. Moving on. All of the accounts payable for FY 21, July 27th, and the second addendum there.
Move to approve.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the
Can I
accounts?
ask a question,
Oh.
Mr. Chairman? Probably for Julie. I just see that there are two different charges for Edgenuity. And one is on the fiscal year 21 and the other one on fiscal year 22. Cassie is raising her hand. Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the accounts payable signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Chair votes aye, and the accounts payable are approved. Moving on to 7.01, input from the public. Again, this is a period devoted to comments by the general public, if any, and discussion of those comments. In the interest of privacy and due process, the public is requested to not raise personnel issues except in a legally noticed closed personnel session of the board. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. No action may be taken upon a matter raised, non-action item. Is there anybody that would like to share comments? Mr. Hoffman.
I don't know why any. Holiday food. Everything I heard tonight, almost everything I heard tonight is disturbing in a very fundamental way. From the top down, you are between a rock and a hard place. You have this massive overlaying organization that directs everything you do. And you have little flexibility in your policy, in your ability to set policies. And then you have your other employers who are your local public. And you're really pinched in a very difficult spot. And some of us try to appreciate how difficult that might be. Having said that, everything from the curriculum control, the textbook control, clear through to the school improvement plan process is all controlled by big government, big organizations, big money. And for example, that UPD organization, they're like consultants that I saw in the mining industry. They come in and they make lots of money and they think they know what they're doing for everybody and they try to make everything the same. And everything the same just flat doesn't work. So I hope that you can find a way to keep your individuality, our county's individuality, our local people's individuality through all of this. Those big organizations want us all to be just the same. We're after equity. We're after standardization instead of standards. There's a difference between standardization and standards. We want to achieve some standards, but for everybody to have to do it exactly the same way is not the best. So I hope you can appreciate the difference between standardization and standards and help us protect our individuality so that we don't become just a homogeneous society throughout, and be aware of the motives of various organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none. Sorry. Meeting's adjourned.
Do you want to make public comment?
I'd say,
Yeah.
go ahead. You sat through the whole meeting. I'd say
Yeah.
we give you a few minutes.
I'd like to hear.
Yep.
Sorry.
So my name is Brent Kelly, I'm local father of 2 kids in the school district, and I never thought I'd see myself up here. But a couple things when they were going through the school stuff, very inconspicuous and kind of disguised, I think, is the CRT. And I know it won't be brought up in here that it's going to be in our schools. We all know it's coming rampant across the nation. Equity came up 3 times, equity and diversity. I'm a God-fearing Christian. I believe this is a country built under God. We are a nation under God. And bringing diversity and equity into our schools, in my opinion, is a huge no-no. You're teaching directly against the Bible. Idolatry is what you're teaching if you bring this into our school. It doesn't need to be in our school, just like the mass, just like the vaccinations, excuse me. Like I said, we're a nation under God, and I don't think we need to be going against that. We're trying to uphold the Constitution here. We're a constitutional county, and we're not subjects. We're not subjects to the government nor to our governor. The government, they get their power, it derives from us, we the people, and we can't give them all the power that they think they have. We have to stand for ourselves and stand for our children. And I just don't think any of that needs to be brought up. I'd like the CRT to be an action item if it could be, because that's coming. I think they're disguising it very well, and that doesn't need to be in our schools, period. So I would like it to be an action item if it could be. And thank you. Thank you for all that you guys do, and please stand up for our kids.
Thank you. Right. Anybody else? All right, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming and